All right, welcome everyone to the final day of the 2021 EPA Region 9 and 10 P2 Roundtable. Over the past 3 days, we've heard from so many programs in our regions and across the country that are doing amazing work in P2. And today, we are on the blue column of the agenda, and we will be discussing P2 implementation today. And I know I've said this every day, but we really do have some great sessions planned. And just a reminder that we'll take a 30-minute break at noon Pacific time, and we'll come back for our afternoon sessions. So I shared this page earlier in the event, but I just want to again thank and acknowledge our nearly 30-member steering committee that has met for nearly 8 months to put together this virtual event for you all. And again, thank you to ERG for providing logistical and technical support for the event. So I see our Zoom support ERG has put some housekeeping reminders in the chat, so please take a look at those. And first up today, we have a session on efficiency and lean facilitated by Hugh O'Neill and Ben Jarvis. So take it away.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Kurt Middlecoop from TMAC is going to give us a really good presentation on learning to see waste. And Kurt, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, and then I'm going to start sharing my screen, which has your presentation on it. So,
sure. Thanks, Ben. And so greetings from Region 6 EPA, and I want to thank the Region 9 and 10 for allowing me to talk to the group. I work for the University of Texas at Arlington, and UTA hosts the MEP, that's the Manufacturing Extension Partnership Grant for the state of Texas. And that organization is called TMAC, Texas Manufacturing Assistance Center. So I am a field staff person. I've been with UTA 26 years. And I am a lean energy environmental practitioner out in the field doing work for TMAC, and also a part of our P2 grants that we receive from Region 6 each year. We've been fortunate to have 15 years of P2 work doing grant delivery for that program. So Ben, would you like me just to jump in and take off?
Yes.
Very good. Very good. Thanks. Thank you. So like I said, I'm with the MEP Center. If you are from another state or in your area, if you don't know who the MEP Center is, if you go to www.mep.org, you can connect with that center in your state. And I would encourage you, if you have not done that, that relationship has been very helpful for me over the last 20 years. I work very closely with our regulatory agencies and also the P2 network in our state. And we now have worked together for 20 years. So it's a great relationship. The MEP connection there can help possibly get individuals into facilities to see what's going on. So I encourage you to have that partnership. Okay, Ben?
Hey, Kurt, this is Hugh. Unless you're in your pajamas, I'd love to see your video.
Oh, yeah. No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in your pajamas, actually. That's fine.
No, I'm good. No worries. I did put on a shirt today, so we're good. So I'm assuming that in the group, there may be some folks who know about lean, and there may be some that don't. So with that being said, I want to just talk about just what is lean and at least get everybody on the same page. So lean is a buzzword. It's been out, for a long time. It came out of the Toyota production system. It really is process improvement. And for a lot of people, you can say it's just common sense. So here's the definition that we use for lean. And let me just kind of walk you through word by word so you can kind of get a feel for it. So first of all, if a company or organization does lean, it's a very systematic activity. There are things that you do to be a lean organization. It's not just a one-day activity. It is an ongoing effort. So first of all, with lean, what we're trying to do is to get the practitioners or people in the organization first to identify, and you see that word identify. So if you walk out and look at a facility that's making a product, what you've got to do is be able to look at what's going on and then look at the activity. And what I'm going to say to the group is always follow the product or service that's being done. So look at the part or the material that's flowing or moving or sitting on the floor and stay focused on that and keep asking yourself, I'm looking at the product, and that's the first thing you want to identify what's going on with the product. And then what we're shooting for is, it says eliminating waste. And I'm going to cover in detail what those are. And waste are any activity that is not actually getting something done on that product that you're seeing on the floor. So focus on the product, look at the product, and then ask, is what they're doing getting something done? Through continuous improvement. So a lean organization is always trying to get better. It could be a daily small task of things getting better, it could weekly, but it is always ongoing. You don't just do lean in 2020 and we're done, and then you don't do it again. Lean is an ongoing activity. Next sentence is flowing the product. If a product is not physically flowing through the processes, step 1, step 2, or in the factory or moving, it's just kind of like what we're hearing about the supply chain with these ships on the ocean, right? If a cargo ship has a cargo item on it, the second it stops moving, so when the boat is docked out in the ocean waiting for the port, it's not flowing. If it's not moving towards the port, it's not flowing. If it's not being unloaded, it's not flowing. If the trucks aren't there to unload it, it's not flowing. So you want to see movement. So a great way to know that you're not lean is if you see something sitting. It's just a great basic idea. So if something's sitting on the floor, you can look at that or tell the organization, hey, it doesn't look like you're lean because you have stuff sitting on the floor. So that's really the simplicity, flowing the product. And the next, at the pull of the customer. What we want to do is the speed or the flow of this product is when the customer wants it. So if, back to the shipping comment, if the US consumer wants 10,000 Samsung refrigerators, those should be flowing at the rate that the customer wants them. Because ideally you want to bring them in and then immediately sell them to the customer. So you're always trying to do that at the pull of the customer. So that's kind of the very detailed of what lean is about, okay? In addition to lean, what I do as a P2 practitioner is Toyota also said, in addition to looking at the time and the physical movement, Toyota also said that waste is anything other than the minimum amount of equipment, materials, parts, space, workers' time, absolutely necessary to add value. So it's really a powerful statement to look at a process, and we'll do that later, and you ask yourself, are we doing the minimum amount necessary? Are we using the minimum amount necessary? Minimum amount of lighting, water, product, chemicals, labor. Just keep asking that question about everything you see, and typically that will pull up a P2 opportunity. Okay, Ben. So I'm going to cover the lean, what the 8 lean wastes are, and specifically, I'm going to give you an example in working with the food and beverage industry. And this example, this last year, we've had the opportunity to work with 2 small microbreweries in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So I'll be talking about lean in general, but I'll kind of give you some lean specifics of a lean example for the brewing industry. Ben? So starting out, the first one, the first lean waste is defects. So anytime an organization is making something and it's damaged, obviously you have to redo it. So it's pretty straightforward. You don't want to have rework or damage occurring. In this example, you can see this brewery makes this pickle beer. And at the start of the day, they receive these cans And in order to load them into the can line, obviously this is going to cause a problem. So now we have to have somebody removing damaged cans prior to them getting in the line, or the bad part would be is if the can were to be filled into a damaged can. So you can see that we want to try to identify the source of defects because those defects can then generate secondary impacts, which are when you have a defect, a lot of time you scrap it, you throw it away, generating hazardous waste, chemical waste, water waste, solid waste. So defects is the first lien waste. Okay, Ben? Next lien waste is overproduction. Lean teaches you in order to keep things flowing from one area to another or one process to another, in order to have that flow. I know in our area, I guess, hey, Ben, do you all have Chick-fil-A's? Chick-fil-A's is nationwide, right? Sorry.
As far as
think
I
so.
know, Kurt, we have them here.
Yeah. Okay, so what Chick-fil-A does is they make sure that they're flowing the product by making sure they have that all those stations covered so that they're getting just what you need. So overproduction says that if you were to take, for example, too many orders at one time, well, they can only handle so many orders a minute, then that would be overproduction. If you're taking it faster than you need to, so anytime you do something more than you need to, that is a lien waste. Or if you're making something the customer doesn't want. So for example, I'll do the Chick-fil-A idea. If back in the back, they're making chicken strips, but yet all the orders are Chick-fil-A sandwiches, and there's a ton of inventory on that, that would not be lean, and that would be an example of overproduction. So ideally, in order to make things flow, you want to make just what you want when you need them and not get ahead. And that's kind of the mentality for a lot of organizations, is they have departments that work independently. They're not looking at the total flow through the facility. So one department says, oh, we're going to get caught up, we're going to make a bunch of extra stuff because then we're covered. And then the next department says, oh, well, I can't take all that stuff right now. My process is slower. So anytime you see things stacked up between a department, you know that someone is doing this lien waste of overproduction. Okay, Ben. Next lien waste is waiting. In this beer example, waiting, obviously, if you're waiting on anything, that means you're not making the product for the customer. So in the beer industry, before they can pour items into these containers, they have to be cleaned. So if they're ready to pour or transfer beer from one vessel to another, and that vessel is not cleaned, now they've got to wait. They got to go clean it. They got to obviously do what they need to do that. They have to get it possibly inspected, check for quality levels before they can actually move the product. So anytime people are waiting, and I'm going to say typically waiting in a lot of manufacturers are either for shortages, and you can see how in our times now we're seeing a lot of part shortages or material shortages. Obviously that's a big waiting issue. Or you're waiting on a supervisor to approve something or over approve something, or you're waiting on an employee who had to go do something, take a break and come back. Well, the whole group may be waiting on just one person to get something done. So this is one of the key lien wastes is waiting. Okay, Ben? The next one is anytime you're doing something that is not adding value. And what I'm going to challenge the team to ask is you'll go to a facility. So for example, I'll use a beer example. You have to ask, who is the customer? So if a customer says, I want to order this beer and I want it to, I'll make up something. It needs to have 6% alcohol by volume. And the organization, that the brewery is working on that. And let's say that in their brewing process, they reach 6% at 10 o'clock in the morning. Okay, it's ready to move out. Yet they leave the beer in the container mixing, just stirring, maybe they're heating it more, but it's just hanging out there, but it's ready to move. So this additional time that it's sitting in this vessel, either being heated or wasted the time or the time, that is non-value added. The customer is not going to pay this beer manufacturer, oh, here's an extra dime for this beer because you overstirred it for 4 hours, or you kept it in your facility refrigerated for 10 days when it only needed to be cooled for 1 day. So anytime you're doing something that the customer does not perceive as value, then that is a non-value added processing. Okay. The next one's transportation. Obviously, this would be in the beer industry. In my example, the operators in this facility had to actually get on a forklift, drive across the street to another warehouse to pick up different materials, and then drive them across the parking lot and come in the building. So anytime you're moving things, that is a lean waste. And lean is really trying to, we're going to have to sometimes do that. We're not saying you can never transport, but what we're trying to do is minimize that travel. So if currently it's 800 feet, if you can make it 700 feet, that's a lean improvement. If you can make it 600 feet, that's an improvement. So as you rearrange your facility over time, you really want to be aware of this non-value added transportation activity. Okay, Ben. The next lean waste is inventory. Lean wants you to have the minimum inventory necessary to create flow. Now, there's a fine balance between having too little inventory, because if you don't have the inventory, it shuts down the different processes. So the idea is the folks that are involved in each of the steps are optimizing the inventory level to do that. Unfortunately, sometimes organizations have to buy things. So for example, you have to buy a container. So like this is a good example. They bought these cans and I said, well, what's going on? He's like, oh, we had to buy a full, 3 truckloads full in order to get the pricing discounts we wanted. I said, okay. So they brought them in and they stuck them in a warehouse for, 3 months, 4 months. But while they are there, what's happening is they're getting dusty, they're getting dented, they're getting, there are additional things happening, and it may have been better just to have paid the extra money and only brought one in at a time, because now these cans may need to be rinsed before they can be used, or many of them are being damaged because there's traffic going by these pallets there, and every day, somebody bumps into one of the cans and dents one on the side. So extra inventory is key for lean. And what I'm going to also say to you, if you're a lean person or not, one of the best ways to speed up a process is to lower the inventory. There's a little formula that simply says the least amount of stuff that you have on the factory floor, the faster it moves through. So I'm trying to think of, so a good example, when my kids were little, if they had a closet with, let's say 400 clothing items, if they needed to get dressed, they would go in and they made search for something. And let's say it took them 22 minutes to find their item and get dressed. If they only had 3 items in their closet, then they could have gotten dressed in 10 minutes. So lowering inventory is the fastest way to speed up a process. It always is. It's very easy. It's very deceiving of how powerful it is. But simply by not having so much inventory on a floor, it will speed up the process. And if you want to learn more about it or look up this principle, it's called Little's Law. Little, like little person, law. Little's Law. And if you want to learn more, that's a good thing to look up. So that's the next lean waste. Next lean waste is motion. What we want to be seeing is either the equipment in the facility or a person who is physically doing work on a part. Their motion should be adding value to the product. So if you are, let's say you're making beer, so a value-added motion would be putting ingredients into the container. So adding the hops, adding the yeast, items that are there. That would be a value-added motion. Or a motor that's agitating the beer in the tank. That's a good motion. But if you're doing a motion that's not adding any value, so in this example, I think there's a ladder, and if you watch this space, what you would see if you sped up the whole day is a one of the beer operators running up and down a ladder 300 times a day. So you've got to stop and say, why are we running up the ladder 300 times a day? And they may say, oh, well, we need to check this, or we need to pour something in. And then Lean would say, well, why don't we figure out a better way other than a person running up a ladder 300 times a day to do that? Could we add a automated line, or could we do something? Because that type of motion is not really getting anything done. It's part of their process, but those are motions that we want to try to eliminate. All right, Ben. And then finally, this is a great photo. This is the actual team. You know, we've got a lot of different people with a lot of different skill sets. When I was at Texas Instruments in manufacturing, many of the folks who worked on doing small assembly work were people who had very small hands, because you could not put a person with a large hand to insert a small part. Likewise, people have different skill sets, and we want to make sure that we're matching the best utilization of someone's skills and what they can do to bring value to a job. So that's kind of the activity there. All right, Ben. So back to this value added and non-value added. One of the things that I've learned to do, and I'll just share quickly with you as part of training, and the folks that are here in the group can do the same thing, is if you're in a facility, take the person that you're with and walk over to either a piece of equipment that's running or a person that's working on the product, and say to them, on a count of 3, I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to clap my hands. The second you hear me clap, I want you to look over at that person or that machine and tell me if it's either adding value, and that's the thumbs up. I want you to simply hold your hand up, thumbs up, or if it's an opportunity for improvement, that it's not adding value, just put your hands across your chest. So it's got to be one or the other. And what I found is when we go over and look, and I tell them 1, 2, 3 now, and I have them look, what people do is they don't look at the clap, they look at what's about to happen. So I'll clap and I'll say, what is it? And they'll all go like this. And I'm saying, well, what are they doing? And they'll typically say, oh, they're getting ready to add, they're getting ready to put the screw into the equipment. I said, no, when I clapped, what were they doing? And they said, well, I guess they were actually walking over to get their drill. I said, exactly. So that is an opportunity for improvement, because they're walking over to get their drill. And that is an opportunity that we want to try to change. So this little exercise of freezing time, if like time stoppers, I'm really dating myself. There's a movie called Time Stoppers where you stop time. That's what you want to do in your brain when you look, is stop time and either say, hey, yeah, that's good, or your hands are across your chest. And after 15 years of doing this, I'm going to say that I have to work with a team. If I've got 10 people in the group, it takes 10 examples before everyone's on board with getting it. So you don't assume that people see what you see. And you may not see what I'm seeing yet, but I think you're beginning to. So that's the lesson learned there. Is this is a great little Simon Says, or stop go exercise to help you see lean. You don't need to be a lean expert. Just do this little exercise. Okay, Ben. All right. So here is an example of a sheet that I produced for one of the breweries, because they wanted to know they wanted a sheet to specifically tell them when they're doing good things. So we wrote up this sheet for the beer industry and said, you're being productive when you do the following, when you're adding ingredients. So when you're physically making the beer, when you're actually heating the beer. So we specifically showed them all of these examples for what value added is. Again, this is when you're actually making the beer and your customer would pay you to do. So another good example is, imagine calling the end beer customer and saying, hi, this is 4 Bullets Brewery. I'm currently over here putting the hops in the tank. As a beer producer, will you pay me to do that? And the buyer would say, yeah, you're going to have to do that. That's how you make beer. So they're going to pay you for that. But if you called them up and said, hi, I have a gentleman that's running up a ladder 300 times a day, will you pay me for that? The customer is going to say, well, why are you running up the ladder 3 times a day? Why don't you not do that? So they would say no. All right, Ben, next slide. So these are the tasks of things that we are trying to get the staff at this brewery not to do. These are things that if they catch themselves doing, they need to say to themselves, here's an opportunity to improve. Searching for materials, looking for parts, saying to yourself, what are you doing? And you say, oh, I'm about ready to do that. I'm getting ready to do something, right? Obviously, you can read this list. So we generated this very specific checklist to kind of help the team to self-monitor and then begin thinking about, well, we ought to do something differently about these non-value added tasks. Okay, Ben. All right, so I'm going to move into what this about E3. So E3 is a partnership between EPA, the DOE, Department of Energy, NIST, National Institutes of Standards and Technology, Department of Commerce, and this SBA, Small Business Administration, to help organizations to look at a kind of a big picture to address sustainability. Okay, Ben? So in addition to lean, I also look for energy waste. So I'm just going to let you look at these. So I also cover the top one, I think it's 8, 7 energy waste that the DOE recommends doing. If you're not connected with the Department of Energy, there's a lot of resources there. I encourage you to go to their website. They have a tremendous amount of tools for energy efficiency. Okay, Ben? And then on the environmental side, what we're looking for is, again, back to that minimum amount necessary. So we want to make sure all the raw materials are being used. And we're looking at the classic metrics for environmental sustainability: water, toxics, hazardous waste, packaging, emissions, regulatory risks that are there. So these topics are also addressed during the E3. Okay, Ben. So what I'm really wanting you to get out of this session is, if you are looking at this slide and you say, oh, well, I'm an environmental person, or, oh, my brain, I'm a financial person, or maybe you're a safety person. What I want you to see, you can see the little cogs, is all these interact with each other. And if you're not integrating these pieces, and there may be others that you could integrate with this, but what we've been doing with our integrated approach is to combine all these elements when we actually look at a process. So I'm going to walk you through a tool that you can do to actually go through this process on your own. Okay, Ben. And I'll be happy to provide this spreadsheet to Ben, and he can pass it out or post it on your website. So this is an Excel spreadsheet that basically is asking you to go through a process. So I'm going to walk you through this, how to use this spreadsheet over a 12-step process. Okay, Ben? So here it is. This is a 12-step process. And I think what I'm going to ask Ben to do in a second, you're going to see this YouTube video and just watch what they're doing. This is my process I want you to use as an example. It's a metal finisher. In a second, you're going to see a hoist lowering a part into a chemical etch bath for metal finishing. But I want you to just look at that with me so I can use this example with Ben, and we can kind of look at it together. Because this
Kurt,
is,
Kurt, I'm gonna share it. I just needed to make sure that it's the 12-step exercise video, right?
yes, sir. Yeah.
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 Okay.
Or that may be my exercise video that I'm doing aerobics in. I'm not
Oh,
sure.
wow.
Yeah.
Does this look right to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, this is it.
Start over. I'm gonna
Yeah,
start
that's
over
fine.
again.
Yeah, that's
Here we
fine.
go.
All right. Okay, so that's it. You saw it. You saw a part up in the air, moving a little bit to the right, and then lowering it down into the water, right? So that's what we're going to talk about next with the 12-step. So Ben, if you'll take me back to the presentation.
Yep, 1 second
No,
here.
no, I know. I appreciate. I'm glad you're doing this and not me.
I gotta bring up, there we go. I gotta get us back on the right. Oops,
No, you're good.
we'll get there. We'll get there.
No, you're good. So we'll do step one, step one.
There we go.
Okay. So how do you use this tool? What you do is you either go to a facility or what I do is I video it. So I gave you an example of a video of these parts being dropped in. So the first thing you do is you watch the process, and what you do is you watch one step at a time. You don't watch 5 minutes of video. You don't watch the whole half hour. You watch one movement at a time. And that's what I'm going to show you. We're going to do one movement. And then I want you to think to yourself out loud, the part was in the air and it dropped into the water. These are questions you should ask. Who is the customer? In this case, I'll make it up. It was an aerospace company. How does this step add value to the customer? So aerospace company, you would call them up and say, hey, I'm moving my part across my etch tank and lowering it down. They would say, well, why aren't you etching my part? Or why aren't you chemically doing? Well, that's your problem. I really want you to exit. How you move it, that's your, whatever, that's your issue. At what moment in time does the value added process begin? So think about it. You got it in your head. When do you think the value added occurred? So Ben, can I ask for the audience to participate?
Of course.
So in your little chat thing, at what exact activity does the value added occur? When is value added occurring for this process? So cast your vote. There are no wrong answers. And in a minute, Ben will read some out loud.
We've got when it drops in the tank, when the part is etched, anyone else want to throw anything in there? When the part's being submerged.
And I'm gonna say that's it. That's the answer, right?
Okay.
The one little corner that goes in first, that one starts processing, but ultimately we got to get that top left corner or that top corner into the batch. Then we're etching, right? Now we're etching at the 4 minutes required, right? That's the deal. So that is correct. So now you know the value occurs only when the part is underneath the water. Now it tells you, well, what could we do about all the others? Okay, Ben? So that's what you do. You write the first step down. In step one, you write it out. Lower suspended part on hangers into dipping tank. And that's what you do. You just list a step. Next step. Then you ask yourself, of the lean waste, which one of the lean wastes are occurring during this process? So look at it. Do you see any lean waste there? I see some. And if you go to the next slide, I'll show you what I saw. So you'll look at line 1. I saw waiting. They're waiting to get the part in the water. It took, you'll notice the first column I fill out is the 15. So it says, what's the value added time? Or the value added time is 0, the non-value added time. And let me tell you what I've done. I used to tell an employee that your time is non-value added. Well, they didn't like that. That made them feel pretty bad. Like, what? Instead of saying something's non-value added, I did the half glass full or whatever empty. I said, oh, here's an opportunity to add value. So now they're like, oh, wow, they're more accepting of when you tell them they're doing something bad. So if you've got kids and they're doing something bad, instead of saying, oh, you didn't clean your room, and you say, oh, here's a great opportunity for you to learn how to clean your room. That's what you should say to them. And maybe they'll, I don't know, clean their room. So 15 seconds of non-value added, and you can see over to the right, we want to ask, how are they doing this? And I wrote down that there's an opportunity to simplify. In this case, I said, how can we reduce the time to get the parts down into the solution? Can the motor have a variable speed control? Could we make it go up and down faster? Could something happen? And I said, if you could save 10 seconds of labor with a variable speed motor. So instead of it being this really slow motor, it had kind of a faster lowering thing. I'm just making, whatever. There's the labor time. So I actually calculated under financial 10 seconds times the number of times they did this each day over a period of annually, the number was $1,600. Moving on down. The other thing that I noted was that the variable speed could also increase the time that the tank is there, meaning the products are being used to grow customer demand. So what I'm saying is, if you get a part in a tank, you're making money off that. If the part's floating above the air, you're not making money. So by adding 10 seconds of time, what that did, it would allow the customer to have $83,000 additional sales because he's spending all these little 10 seconds all the way across all of his tanks. That was the actual number for sales growth. And then thirdly, the opportunity when we ask the questions, you see in the middle there, it asks why, where, when, how, who, and how. Those are the questions you ask, the 5 whys, to help your brain come up with an idea to improve. The other improvement we asked was, why is this operator manually holding the button down to lower the parts? Because the operator's just standing there. Why couldn't we just have him tap a button and it would automatically lower it in? And so in that case, now we're at a whole new level of saving additional time, and that time was an $8,000 savings. So in this example, just the 15 seconds of opportunity, reducing it down to 5 or 10, you can see how the tool can be used to calculate financial savings, sales growth, and also just the dollar savings of the labor. So that's the first part. Okay, next one. The next thing we did, so we did the blue arrow, the blue section for lean. Now we're going to go in and look at the energy part. So here's what we do is energy. Again, we're looking at lights. Are there lights in the area? Are there fans, motors? You can just read through. These are the top areas that the DOE says you should look for. So we did that, and then let's go to the next step. So for the same things, instead of lean opportunities, what I realized is we'll start with the heaters, the line 2. We asked energy, and in this case, there were heaters. And I said the heaters are manually controlled. I found that out when I asked. They are not on a thermostat. And we said simply, why don't you add a thermostat to manage the temperature settings? They're not doing that. So in that scenario, what that produced was several things. Currently, the way they get their temperatures up were at the start of the day, they turn on the breaker. Well, if they had them automatically controlled, they could actually reduce their electricity. The number was 40,000 kilowatts of electricity on this tank, that we're talking this one tank, and it would save them $3,000 annually. So here's an example where they were doing nothing to manage their energy. And then from that, we used the EPA greenhouse calculator to get the greenhouse gases. So there's an energy line, and you can see that at the bottom line, another energy opportunity was the tanks were uninsulated. And we had them put these floating spheres on top of the tank to insulate the tank. There's the savings for the tank being insulated with the spheres. In addition to energy, the next piece we also see is there's environmental things that are happening. There's water going on. We found out that when the tanks are heated, uninsulated, the water evaporation is high. So we were able to add in the word water under environmental and ask, how are we doing that? Well, we can insulate the tank to reduce the water usage by 5,000 gallons a year into that tank. So you see how this is starting to integrate. The lean things lead into energy and then environmental. Okay, next. And so under the environmental, and you saw me kind of covered, obviously energy does impact the environmental. So that case, there was kind of an overlap between energy and environmental. Now we'll just ask environmental. we're looking for these environmental impacts. So go to the next slide. And you can say, here's some strictly environmental things that are there that we added that I kind of talked to you about. We talked about the spheres to reduce evaporation for both of them. So we added in the environmental on the tool. And then next one, Ben. And then the next one is safety. So we asked, where are there opportunities where safety can occur? And we're looking for things that can fall, move, turn, come off, because these are the actions that cause safety injuries. You don't have to necessarily know all the safety rules, but you know that if you fall or something falls, something can happen to a person, right? So we looked at this and asked, can any of these occur? And Ben, next slide. Which leads us to, yeah, they could fall. And I wrote down parts can fall off the hanger and splash chemicals onto the operators. And their action, which they're not doing, is they didn't have appropriate PPE on their operators to prevent the injury from happening. And we gave the owner the number, which says a lost time injury day is typically $4,000 impact on the company. So there's the safety piece. And next one, Ben. And then finally, financial, what we're looking for, because we know that these organizations, they may care about a lot of things in here. They may care about lean or energy, environmental safety, but let me tell you, they all care about financial, right? So this piece is important, looking for ways to reduce costs. And then Ben, next slide. And what I did, what you're seeing is, though you can't see the full spreadsheet, all of the opportunities that I just mentioned, the lean, the energy and environmental, the safety and financial, these are the total impacts now of that. And what I'm going to say to you, and I think you're getting this, we have only reviewed one 15-second process, 15 seconds. So in 15 seconds of review, you can see, you can find significant savings, but you will never find these savings unless you break down the tasks into small measurable elements. And you're thinking, well, gosh, Kurt, I could spend a week there analyzing this whole process. And the answer is, yes, you could. That is correct. But this is such a powerful tool. If you can train the organization to do this on one step and they do it on their own, they may become engaged to self-analyze what they're doing. So that's the tool. It's an integrated approach to identifying all waste, not just lean, but across the P2 environment. Okay. And let me show you one more example and then I'll stop because I'm about out of time. So just here's another quick one. An organization during a changeover was using water, lots of water. You see the big hose there. And so that's what we saw. And then here's what happened. Show the next slide, Ben. So the water that they used was obviously going on the floor on the left. And then we like, where's the water going? Well, the water went down the production floor into this drain, and that drain went to their water collection area where they treated the water. You know, they added chemicals to the water, they processed the water, and then they released it into the city system. So they're processing all this water. So there are costs there. Next one. So I'm just kind of showing you the same thing that I did with the other one. So this is kind of a flow. So the water waste ended up identifying we needed a new nozzle. The new nozzle showed us that if we had the nozzle, instead of it being a big hose, we could clean faster because now we had a spray. The faster cleaning led to reduction in the labor time to change over the process. That labor time gave them more time to produce the products. That gave them increased sales. That led to, it also led to less water being used. We saw that, which meant lower treatment costs, which then also had less water on the floor to trip and fall on, which could also reduce lost time accidents, which could lower their insurance, which gave a safer environment. And then you had less turnover. So you can see how all these things are all integrating. And that's my closing message is, do not forget to link all these things together because it's very powerful. And if a customer doesn't see all these, I think it's our job to show them how it's not just energy, it's not just environmental, it's everything. And I guarantee you, companies care about maybe half of these, but if you integrate them together, they have to listen to all of them. So that's kind of my story. All right, Ben? So that's it for me. If you need any questions or have any, questions for me specifically, there's my contact. Thanks again, Ben and Hugh, for inviting me to come here to talk to the group. And I hope the rest of the sessions go well. Thanks.
Yeah, Kurt, really appreciate you presenting to us today. I wanted to stop sharing, but I wanted to give, we got 60 people in the room, and I know we've got a couple of questions on the chat, and I'm gonna read through what I've got. Dean was asking, how do you handle parts of the process that are necessary, such as like prepping parts and packaging, but they're not really value added?
So if you're prepping a part, is basically getting the part ready for the part where it's being installed or whatever. So the question is, how can you prep the part so that it's part of the flow? So for example, here's a good one. Prepping the beer place. They were prepping boxes, empty boxes to put the beer cans in. I was like, why are you prepping the boxes? And they said, oh, we want to get these prepped ahead of time so we can, save time later. I'm like, well, it only takes 3 seconds to prep it. Why isn't this part of your process? So instead of building up an inventory of 600 boxes that were taking up, 20 by 10 part of their room, I said, just build the box when you need it. Stop prepping ahead of time, right? If you can, that's what you want to do. So that would be my comment about prepping. Prepping is, in that case, the customer said, do you want the beers in a box? They said yes. So the prepping of the box was value added. So you want to ask, is the prep, this person who's asking the question, would the customer pay you to do this prep, or are you doing this to do something that you think is saving time? If that's the case, I'm going to tell you, you might want to rethink what you're doing.
Yeah, definitely. Kurt, I wanted to ask you a question, and this is kind of like the holy grail for me is, I do a lot of these, lean projects with companies, but the real challenge I have is maintaining, the changes, the implementation of changes, and then like really instituting a culture of change at a company. Because a lot of times, I'm working with smaller teams, they're just like in one production area, and you get a lot of buy-in, and like you make some really good improvements, but a lot of times that doesn't like translate far up the chain, and then it doesn't disseminate out terribly well to other areas of the company, and we just kind of end up like reverting back to an initial state of
right,
inefficiency. And what is your experience, and what kind of suggestions do you have for all of us on the call as to how to really promote the culture change? Because that to me is really like, how do we keep this like self-sustaining? And what
right.
I've seen from companies that are really good at it, I mean, it takes a lot of leadership.
Yeah.
And I'm still searching for that magic sauce, how to really get that going.
Right. So one of the things that we do, we have a class that we teach that not only teaches the operator on the floor what lean is, we teach the supervisor what lean is, we teach the manager what lean is, and what the executive team, what their role is. So they all have a role. And I can share that presentation with you, because those people also have to be taught what their role is. So if you're the CEO, your role is probably to be checking, going and checking on the lean, certain lean activities during the day. So if it's a metric they're measuring, question, why haven't we gotten our numbers today, or whatever, but all of them will have to be trained on that. On sustaining, so I think that would be the answer, is you have to have top management buy-in, or you're wasting your time. You're going to be there and you're going to go back 2 years later, and everything you did is going to go back to nothing, the same thing. The other one would be, if the company has a management system like an ISO 9000, what you do is you write a procedure for the new method, and you get it in part of their documented management system that then becomes an audited item that has to be maintained. So that would be one to do. Would be.
I think that, yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's a really good insight, because I mean, a lot, if anybody's working with a manufacturer of any kind of significance, I'd say most of them have some experience with ISO 9000. Typically, we see 9000 a lot more than anything else. I've only worked with 2 companies in Idaho that have any experience with 14,000. So you typically don't see the environmental ISO standard, but 9000 is very common even in smaller companies, and that's a really good approach. I really like that.
The other quick idea is a company that we videoed will, once they get the new process down, we have them do the new process, we video it, we post the video out on hidden on YouTube or whatever, a private link, and we have a QR code on the procedure that says, do you know what you're supposed to do here? Scan here and watch the video. It doesn't need to be in 4 languages. It's, you see, oh, okay, I'm supposed to be doing that. Well, I'm not, so you can post a video of the new process as a way to control it. Maybe it'll work.
Yeah. Hey, Hugh, I didn't know if you wanted to say anything, but if you didn't, I've got a video I could share that maybe I could get Kurt and maybe some of our other participants insights on as to what types of waste they're seeing. But I want to give you a shot.
While you're queuing that up, I'll just ask Kurt one question, or maybe make a comment and ask a question. I really like your sort of little spreadsheet there, Kurt, adding environment and energy and finance and safety all together, and lean all together, because I think, tell me if I'm wrong, but that helps that set of opportunities, or that helps that project, compete for scarce capital dollars that the company, that CEO that you talked about, their role, they're looking at, well, what opportunities, what projects, how do we improve that? That's going to really make that a larger project that's going to, rise to the top of that list for, this year's capital dollars. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
I know that by doing lean alone, I've got the measures for 15 years. By adding energy, environment, and safety to it, you typically get 30% more new things like savings and impact. So you're leaving 30% on the table if you're a lean person not addressing that. And if you're an environmental or safety person, you're not talking lean, you're leaving stuff on the table too.
Yeah, lots of stuff. Yeah, okay, thanks, Ben. Go for it.
Yeah, 1 second here. I'll cue this up. And really, okay, so the context for this video is we were working with a brewery in Idaho, and they purchased a canning line, and the canning line is having some challenges. And what you're going to see is the filling station on the canning line itself. So if I can cue that, there we go.
They don't like get that out.
So I don't know exactly how well you guys could see that, but if you guys could see those, so all of those filling stations had names on them. You saw like Zach Morris and Martha Stewart and so, and every time that George Jones came around, it was just spilling beer all over the place. So that was like one every 10 beers they were losing essentially an entire can of beer every time that filling station went around. And so from seeing the waste, it's like, oh, we have a defect here, right? That's really driving the problem, and we need to go like hunt down the reason why we're having these defects. Obviously, yeah, it's like we have customers not going to want to pay for like a half-filled can of beer or something with a dented can, right? And so what we ultimately learned in that project was that filling station had a sheared bearing on it that was, and then the root cause of that problem is that they did not have a maintenance schedule for that canning line. They bought it kind of as a one-off deal. And when they did, like the manufacturer, the assembler of that canning line did not have any kind of indication as to when things needed to be replaced and how often they needed to be, lubricated or checked for tolerance or anything like that. And so that major problem, that maintenance problem, ultimately led to like all these defects, and like something on the order of 10 to 12% of their product was being lost due to that and other defects later on in the canning process. So just like being able to see that waste is really important. So I don't know, Kurt, if you saw anything else in that video that we should draw our attention to.
No, I saw somebody ask, where did the beer go on the floor? So yeah, did they mop it
down
out?
Down the drain to the wastewater treatment plant that they got to pay for?
Yeah, and potentially, that biochemical oxygen demand is going to cause problems either there or at the city treatment plant.
Yep. And that's where it was all going. It was not being recaptured and recanned or anything like that. It was going to the sewer.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks, Kurt. And Ben, I appreciate those very specific and practical examples. What I also just wanted to add as our time draws near is that the manufacturing extension partnership folks, we've worked with them in Washington State since about 2005. And, now they have folks out looking for projects for me because our state agency doesn't really do marketing and sales very well. And the MEP folks do. It's just a real asset to have those folks as partners and on our team out there looking for projects that are both going to benefit the environment as well as, increase profits for the company. So if you want to know more about that, let me know. And hopefully I can share some of the secret sauce. It takes a while, and it helps to bring resources to the table, of course, too. Back to you, Ben.
Yeah, I think that's what we've got. So really appreciate it. Thank you, Kurt. And I think we're going to turn it back to Brittany, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kurt and Ben and Hugh. That was a great session, very engaging. So next up, we have Lisa Cox will lead a session on P2 internships, and we get to hear directly from some of the interns that she has worked with. So over to you, Lisa.
Thank you, everyone. And I just want to, can you confirm with a thumbs up that you can see my screen? Okay. Okay, thank you, everyone. My name is Lisa Cox, and I work for the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. And today we're going to talk a little bit about Oregon's Pollution Prevention Intern Program and the results. For the agenda, I'll provide just a quick overview of the program. Then you'll hear directly from the interns with some Q&A at the end. And then we'll also hear from the Washington State Department of Ecology about their upcoming program, and we'll end with Q&A for anything that might be remaining. So we have a really great list of presenters today that you see in front of you. We'll be talking with each one of them. And again, please go ahead and type your questions into the chat. And then at the end of each of the intern presentations, we will have just like 1 minute for each of us or each of you to talk about any questions that you might have. Okay, so just a quick overview of the Oregon Applied Sustainability Experience Internship Program. It is obviously an internship program that we've been running for 5 years now, which is really shocking. Even through COVID, we made it through a lot of barriers. And I'm coming to you from Portland, Oregon. Now, the Oasis program is a serious partnership that could only be made possible through Oregon Sea Grant, who assists in administering the program, and EPA Pollution Prevention Grant funding. There are over 40 organizations, nonprofits, and host businesses who have supported the program through mentorship, outreach, training, and more. The Oregon Sea Grant is responsible for recruiting students, being the liaison to the interns and businesses in many cases, and giving students their stipends, which is very important. DQ, myself, is responsible for recruiting businesses, building those relationships, and providing mentors to the students. We focus on research projects that further pollution prevention, green chemistry, and sustainable materials management goals and projects, and that meet the goals of Oregon's 2050 Vision and Framework for Action. And I'll drop that link in the chat so that you can find out more about that. The paid interns are on site for 10 weeks with Oregon businesses to conduct projects that they've chosen. And yeah, and we've had, like I said, many students from 2017 that have focused on a variety of projects that include eliminating hazardous waste, conducting preliminary life cycle assessments on packaging, to water conservation, to preventing water pollution, reducing energy usage, preventing food waste, reducing hazardous waste and solid waste, and more. During 2020, we introduced a concept of assisting businesses explore obtaining their Safer Choice certification. And you see all the pictures. I'm sorry, this one's kind of blurry at the bottom, but you'll see who the students were paired with at the very bottom in text there. In 2021, we had another great group, and this is who you will hear from today, and I'm very excited to be able to hand it over to them in just a minute. Before we get there, I wanted to just show that the program has had interns across the entire state, mostly focused in the Valley or in the Portland metro area along Eugene and down to Salem, but we have had many in other parts of the state. Most of our students come from Portland State University, Oregon State University, and the University of Oregon in Eugene. We've had a lot of really great results that you see here, and you can also check out more of this on our webpage that I will also drop in the chat here in just a minute. And you can also find the case studies that we have put online from several of our past projects. So with that, now it's the real part of the presentation where we get to hear from our student presenters. First up is Toni Trin, who will talk with us about her time at Boeing. Next will be Kylie Church, talking about her project at Providence Healthcare. Derek Ya with Pacific Seafood, a second-time host. Adrienne Wallace from the Tofurkey Company in Hood River. And Jason Leon Guerrero, who was with us for the Willamette Paper Company. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Toni. And Toni, can you turn on your camera so I can see you?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you see me okay?
There we go, yes.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. Today I'll be talking about my experience at Boeing during the summer of 2021. I will begin with talking a little bit about myself. So currently I'm entering my last year studying chemical engineering at Oregon State University. And I participated in an environmental study-based abroad program during the fall of 2019, and it really solidified my desire to work on projects regarding about sustainability and pollution prevention. And I also like to do volunteering, kayaking, and puzzles during my free time. As stated before, the Oasis Internship is a 10-week paid summer internship where students work on projects regarding pollution prevention and sustainability. And Boeing is one of the leading manufacturers of commercial aircraft and the company-wide initiative. And they also have a company-wide initiative where they're aiming towards reducing their environmental impact by the year 2025. And these are the goals that they have made based off 2017 criteria, and they're gonna aim to reach these by 2025. And the Oasis Internship has partnered with them to work closely on achieving these goals. During my internship, I had 6 projects total. I had 3 main projects on blast media, alkaline soap, and vapor degreasing alternatives. And the additional projects I had was hazardous solid waste surveys, rotable packaging, and zinc nickel freeze out. I'll go more into detail in this presentation a little bit. So the blast media are small sand-sized beads that are used to remove paint or contaminants from various airplane parts, and the blast media is recycled to be used for other purposes. For example, the blast media here will be used for roads. And for the alkaline soap project, the alkaline soap is used to clean airplane parts, and due to the high pH, it's considered a hazard. So it'll be a hazardous waste once it's disposed. So during my internship, essentially the pH will be adjusted so the solution is no longer hazardous, and I calculate the projections and the cost for it. And vapor degreasing. So vapor degreasing is the general process is where the parts are hovered in the vapor zone and condensate collects at the part, and then the contaminants drip off. So when it starts to cool, so the part is then raised to the cooling coil, so they'll be cooled down, and the parts will be cleaned. So the chemical that they use is perchloroethylene, and that is a carcinogenic chemical, and it's on the top priority list by the EPA. And I worked on a project where I worked towards making a technical report, trying to find alternatives to vapor degreasing and chemicals that we could potentially use in the future. The other side project is the hazardous solid waste surveys. So I went around on site looking at the various accumulation waste stations and make sure that the waste is properly disposed of, along with revising and verifying the drawings of the site. And rotable packaging. So for those who don't know what rotable packaging is reusable containers between like a manufacturer and a supplier, where they reuse these containers to reduce their use of single-use packaging materials. And currently Boeing has one for their larger parts, but they don't have it for smaller airplane parts. So what I worked on was trying to figure out a system to implement and create a proposal regarding implementing a rotable packaging system for the site. So the zinc nickel freeze out. So it's similar to the alkaline soap project, but they actually let the solution cool down. So then the carbonates are able to precipitate out into a solid form. And then the pH is also adjusted, so it's considered a non-hazardous waste. And I also calculated projections on the waste and disposal costs for it. And the P2 recommendation. So during my time there, I was able to work on them, and we work on these projects, and we discovered that by choosing the alkaline soap project, if we implement it, it could reduce the waste by 200 tons annually. Along with the other side projects I had, like the vapor degreasing alternatives, it has the potential to reduce the hazardous waste by 4 to 6 tons, or 4.4 for the air emissions. And going back to the P2 triangle for pollution prevention, a lot of the projects at Boeing is going up higher on this pyramid, where it's on pollution and reducing their environmental impact, and a little bit of the rescue aspect. So the higher on the pyramid, the better it is. the lessons I have learned. So I also learned that change takes a lot of time and simple switches can lead to a highly beneficial change. For example, the Aqueous soap project, just changing that pH results in a very good change where we're able to reduce over 200 tons annually of hazardous waste. And it's good to look at the projects in a holistic manner because there's a lot of key players that are involved in the projects. And these are acknowledgements. Thank you for everyone who made this project possible, especially for my mentor team at Boeing, along with my Oasis internship. And questions for anyone?
Okay, yeah, thank you, Tony. I'm sorry for the back and forth. I was actually looking in the comments for chat in the chat box for questions. So I apologize for not getting to those switches. Are there any questions for Tony? I know this is very fast. Okay, well, thank you so much, Tony, for your great work and your participation in the Oasis program. We're so grateful to have an amazing student like yourself participate. And I know you have another class to get to, so we'll talk to you soon.
Would you like me to answer the question real quick that's in the chat?
Oh, are there questions? Oh, they just popped up. Okay, yes.
Okay. For the first one, what do you see as alternatives for vapor degreasing? Unfortunately for vapor degreasing, a lot of the available chemicals that are used commercially are all on the EPA list for toxic chemicals. So one of the main alternatives that works well with many of the airplane parts at Boeing is actually aqueous degreasing, and that's a very common alternative that a lot of other companies or aerospace companies have also found, is that aqueous, which is basically using alkaline soap and like dipping it into the solution to clean it, is probably the best alternative in a feasible manner in terms of not generating as much of hazardous waste.
Okay, and I do see the next question. What are they doing with the blast media, and is it sand?
Yes, actually they're like blast beads. So the blast media is basically, it's like they're shooting these tiny beads at very high velocity at these parts. And sometimes there's contaminants or paint. Sometimes if they have to repaint things, they'll have to like strip it off. And that's probably the most effective way without impacting the quality of the material. And sometimes they want to polish it to make it a little bit smoother. So there's various purposes that the blast media can be used for.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Thank you. And thank you for the questions. We'll see you later. And we're going to turn it right over to Kylie Church. Go ahead, Kylie. Great job.
Is my audio coming out okay? Can I get a thumbs up?
Yes, I hear you.
Wonderful. Well, thanks, Tony and Lisa. And hello, everybody. Thanks so much for being here with us today at the roundtable. My name is Kylie Church, and I'm a P2 intern with Oasis. And today I'll be sharing my management project and lessons learned working with the Providence healthcare system on projects to advance climate and toxic stewardship within their Oregon laundries. So a little bit about me before we jump in. I'm a recent graduate from Portland State University with a degree in environmental science. I'm currently an environmental outreach specialist at PPRC, where I work with cleaning businesses to implement safer chemical use. 2021 was my second year as an intern, so it was very exciting for me to come back for another year in the cohort and a second year with my host business, which is Providence Health and Services, one of the nation's largest healthcare systems. Across the state of Oregon, Providence operates 8 hospitals, and an essential material used in these hospitals are linens, which allow for hygienic and safe patient care. Providence, Oregon uses approximately 12 pounds of linen per patient per day at their hospitals. So this creates a large volume of soiled material that needs to be laundered, as well as significant water and chemical inputs. Providence, Oregon is a part of the larger healthcare system, Providence Health and Services, who as a healthcare system aims to achieve the goals of carbon negativity and 50% waste reduction by 2030. To meet these goals, Providence developed a set of stewardship priorities under the We Act framework, which mobilizes initiatives focused on waste, energy, agriculture, chemicals, and transportation. In 2021, an environmentally preferred purchasing standard was adopted with the purpose of advancing stewardship across the supply chain by reducing the purchase and distribution of toxic products. Toxic chemicals of concern are problematic because of their established endocrine disruption and carcinogenicity effects in humans, as well as environmental ecotoxicity. Within the Portland Metro Region's 5 hospitals, an offsite industrial launderer shown on the left collects, washes, and distributes all linens used. And in 2019, they processed 9.5 million pounds of linen. At smaller rural hospitals, shown on the right, linens are laundered on-site by frontline staff. In 2019, 2 on-site laundries processed 630,000 pounds of linens. So for Oasis, Providence was interested in footprinting their laundry operations and assessing their chemical products for safer alternatives. I worked on 3 projects that aim to reduce carbon and toxic chemical emissions while enhancing workplace safety and environmental quality. Our first project was a life cycle assessment to footprint environmental impacts across the Providence, Oregon laundry life cycle, pictured in this diagram. Our assessment determined that overconsumption of linen at the hospital is the main driver of Providence, Oregon's pollution generation. Since the more linen that gets consumed, indicated by the yellow frame in this diagram, the more soiled linen must be laundered, thus generating more source pollution. Our assessment also established that for every 1 pound of linen laundered, about 0.3 kilograms of CO2 equivalent emissions are released. This information is being used by individual hospitals and departments for accountability of their linen use and to track toward their negativity goals. Our next project was utilizing our life cycle assessment to model an alternative process. There's about 30,000 pounds of end of life or waste linen sent to landfill annually. And Providence wanted to see the emissions and raw material savings if we were to recycle these linens as sellable consumer goods. Our assessment found that by recycling, Providence would prevent 53 metric tons of CO2 equivalent emissions and 40,000 kilowatt hours of electricity use. They would also offset 30,000 pounds of raw material in the manufacturing stage and save $1,500 from landfilling costs annually. In my last project, I worked with PPRC to conduct a chemical assessment of the laundry products currently in use. I used green screen, which is a method for chemical hazard assessment designed to identify chemicals of high concern and safer alternatives. I reviewed SDS of the laundry products used at all laundries and assessed formulation ingredients in green screen to determine that at the industrial laundry, 50% of products used contained toxics, and at the on-site laundries, about 80% of products contained toxics. I also compared chemical purchasing against their environmentally preferred purchasing standards and found that at the industrial laundry, 82% of total chemical spends go against their own standards for toxics reduction. I worked with the chemical manufacturing vendor to develop an alternative safer chemical lineup that has equivalent hygienic laundering power while being formulated to EPA's Safer Detergent Stewardship Initiative standards. These alternative products eliminate the need for bleach, require lower water temperatures, and are more biodegradable than conventional products. It was a surprise to find out that switching to the greener lineup from the same vendor would only increase annual chemical costs by 2.7%. So these products informed my 3 recommendations above. And if one hospital study during my internship maintains a current 14% consumption reduction trend through the end of this year, they will save almost $300,000 while preventing 131 metric tons of CO2 equivalent emissions. To advance adoption of the environmentally preferred standards, I recommended and created a chemical management plan which removes 62,000 gallons of products containing toxics from the chemical supply chain. So for my lessons learned, I learned that by filtering purchases through Safer Choice and the Safer Choice ingredient list, businesses can implement their environmentally preferred standards and have access to necessary toxics reduction technical assistance. I also learned that in healthcare sustainability, there's a larger awareness and buy-in around decarbonization, but less for toxic chemical reduction. And the perception that safer alternatives cost more can be a major barrier to implementation, even when they can cost about the same as conventional products. All right, well, thanks for your time and attention today. It was great presenting to you all. Here's my contact information, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
That is so amazing. I just am always in such awe after I see the presentations. The questions aren't popping up for me right away. Do you see any in your chat box, Kylie?
Not yet.
Okay. Okay. Well, I guess I did have a question about some of the results. I know it's because you had 2 years, essentially 2 summers to work on this. How do you think that, I guess, helped or didn't help the project in year 2?
Yeah, so I was able to expand on a lot of the insights that I discovered in year 1. Year 1, one of the major takeaways was the discovery of NPEs, or a chemical of concern, in a product that was used. It's actually in the product that was pictured on the green screen slides. So that was what I really wanted to remove that somehow, but I just couldn't in my first 10 weeks. So in these next 10 weeks, that was the major point of priority, to overhaul their entire chemical lineup. But it's really challenging to do that all in 10 weeks. And for a major healthcare organization, there are so many stakeholders at the table that it almost was, I presented the information, but it's hard to mobilize action.
Yeah, and I know you presented in front of all of the executives at one point. Is that Hugh asked, how did you get Providence management attention and support? I guess attention is one thing and support is the other.
Yeah, so I had great support, strongly from the industrial launderer, which Providence actually partially owns. So I had an in kind of at the management level of the facility that was generating all the impact. I also had the regional laundry and linen manager on my team. He was a mentor on the project, and he sits on the board of the industrial launderer. So I was interacting with a lot of influencers, and unfortunately, it just was not able to make any quick changes right away. There's contract negotiations yearly, and then you have to go all the way up to the healthcare administration level because their supply chain standards go nationwide. So we can't really work independently in Oregon. Made it very challenging.
It did, it was, but I love that you were so persistent. So great job. And we're going to move on to our next intern. Derek, take it away.
Hello, everybody. My name is Derek Yao, and today I'll be talking to you about my internship this summer at Pacific Seafood, where I focused on chemical management. So as we've heard already, the Oasis program focuses on the prevention and reduction of toxics, energy, water, and waste. Through this program, students like me are able to help businesses find solutions to sustainability-related issues and apply sustainability principles to said issues. This program also helped me strengthen my network and develop professionally. So a little bit about the company. Pacific Seafood is a family-owned company committed to providing people with the healthiest protein on the planet, being seafood. Their headquarters are located in Clackamas, Oregon, and they own more than 40 facilities across the United States. They also hold many seafood certifications, including those from the Marine Stewardship Council and the Aquaculture Stewardship Council, to name a few. So a little bit about me. I'm currently a senior at Oregon State University, where I'm majoring in ecology and minoring in sustainability. I've always been really interested in and passionate about sustainability, especially regarding the long-term viability of the relationship that humans have with the environment. As I mentioned before, my internship this summer focused on chemical management. The work that I did focused on pollution prevention of hazardous sanitation chemicals, as well as the plastic 55-gallon drums those chemicals come in, which you can see on the right. So my work focused on the implementation of automated dilution systems, recycling and reconditioning of plastic chemical drums, and improving management to reduce spills and accidents. And on the right there, you can see an image of one of the Pacific Seafood facilities in Newport, right on the coast. So many of the sanitation chemicals are sold in concentrated form and diluted with water when used. Automated dilution systems, such as the one on the left, can help guarantee correct chemical dilutions every time and decrease the amount of contact needed between sanitation workers and their chemicals, reducing accidents and spills. Since many Pacific Seafoods facilities, as was seen on the previous slide, are right on the coast, reducing chemical spills is crucial to prevent spill pollution from going into the ocean. I also identified and proposed recycling and reconditioning of chemical drums through a third-party company to reduce plastic waste going into landfills. However, the chemical drums need to be completely empty in order for the company to accept them for recycling. So to reach all the chemicals at the bottom of the drums, a solution I found was a drum wedge, which is pictured in green on the right. This props up one side of the drum, allowing the drum pumps, which act like a straw, to reach the bottom of the drum better. Is a very cost-effective solution to a problem that many of Pacific Seafoods facilities had in the past. Another project I worked on that wasn't directly related to chemical management, instead focused on water conservation. In one of my facility visits, I found this sink on the left, which would turn on via sensor when people walk by, even when they weren't using it, and also turned on 9 faucets at once whenever it was turned on. This started as an area for potential water waste reduction. And the solution I found for this was to replace this sink with a foot pedal sink seen on the right. And this is potentially a solution that could be applied to many of their facilities, though I only visited that facility and saw it there. So this is a summary of the recommendations I made to Pacific Seafood based on the research that I did. By recycling and reconditioning of the chemical drums, at least 6,750 pounds of plastic waste can be saved from landfills annually, which is equivalent to about 4.8 metric tons of carbon dioxide. The replacement of the sink will save an estimated 32,850 gallons of water a year. And the implementation of the drum wedge will save at least $6,930 annually in the form of chemicals that can now be utilized from the bottom of the drums. And the main lessons I learned from this internship are the prevalence of space and logistical problems, especially when it comes to housing hazardous materials and chemical drums, and that pollution prevention opportunities can be found everywhere and can take many different forms. For example, the inefficient sink was actually something that I didn't expect to find while at the facility and just happened to notice. So it taught me that I can find areas of potential pollution prevention everywhere. And thank you, and I'll open up to questions now.
Thank you, Derek. I love that all the students know and understand what pollution prevention is, and that you were able to actually just look around while you were visiting the facility and say, hey, that's an opportunity. That's wonderful. So I don't see any questions in the chat. Do you see any?
I do not see any.
Okay, well, awesome job. And I think that the partnership with Pacific Seafood has been amazing. There's another intern doing their presentation right now for another water conservation project. So I think that's really wonderful. Derek, do you have any other comments on your project or your experience?
Just thank you for giving me the experience. It was really great to be able to do something so close to what I enjoy over the summer.
Yeah, yeah. And that drum wedge seems so simple, but brilliant, right? As he says.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Thanks, Derek. We'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up is Adrienne Wallace. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Adrienne Wallace. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm in my final term as a graduate student at Oregon State University. I'm pursuing a professional science master's in environmental science, and my hope is to work as an environmental consultant after graduation. A few of my hobbies, although I have a lot, include singing, reading, creative upcycling, and cooking. It's really a pleasure to be here today, and I'm just excited to share with you my experience as an intern with the Tofurky Company. For today's presentation, I'll be sharing some background information on my host business. I'll overview what my projects were, some results and recommendations, and then some lessons learned. And as with the other interns, I'll leave some time for questions at the end. So I spent my 10 weeks as an intern with the Tofurky Company. They are a plant-based food manufacturer making protein options such as deli slices, chicken, sausages, and burgers. And I can attest they're all really good. They're a family-owned company and a certified B Corporation with over 200 employees at their facilities in Hood River, Oregon. Their main mission is to create a more environmentally conscious and friendly food system that respects people, planet, and animals. The main purpose of my work this summer was to benchmark and assess their sustainability performance and develop some environmental goals, which would lay part of the foundation for their longer-term environmental management system and sustainability program. I had two main projects this summer. The first had to do with Walmart's Project Gigaton, which is Walmart's main sustainability initiative, where they're aiming to remove the equivalent of 1 gigaton of emissions from their supply chain. As a supplier for Walmart, Tofurky has chosen to participate in Project Gigaton and fulfill their two main requirements, which were to develop and set SMART goals, SMART being specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. And the last requirement is that they report their emissions annually. The second project that I focused on was benchmarking Tofurky's supply chain performance using the Sustainability Insight System Index, or THESIS. And I worked really closely with the supply chain and logistics team to gather appropriate data and evaluate their processes for improvement. For my first project, I developed SMART goals for 2022 and then some longer term goals for their company environmental management system. The goals that I made were tied to 4 main impact areas that I identified this summer, which were water, energy, waste, and supply chain. These goals focus primarily on water, waste, and emissions reductions from 2020 levels. And then I suggested an incremental increase in renewable energy use for 2022 and beyond. For my second project, I worked closely, as I said, with the supply chain and logistics team, and we developed a questionnaire for new and existing vendors using the THESIS index as a guide. And I was also able to increase their THESIS scores by 25% from what they were in 2020 and developed a plan for them to continue increasing those scores year over year. The recommendations that I have here are based on the 2022 SMART goals that I created for Tofurky and are focused primarily on the reduction targets from 2020 levels. These recommendations could result in a cost savings of approximately $200,000 annually, water savings of over 3.5 million gallons of water, and almost 2,500 tons of CO2 equivalent emissions avoided. This would roughly equate to 6 adults in Oregon earning a livable wage for 1 year, 117 years of water use at home for 1 person, and 1 year of energy use for 275 homes in the United States. I really learned so much at my time with Tofurky, but I'll just share a few of the most important lessons that I will carry with me into my future work. The first one has to do with imperfect data. I think we can all relate when we hope to work with the most accurate and complete data, and unfortunately that's just not always the case. So learning to be flexible and do the best you can with what you have was a big lesson for me. And the second lesson is just that about prioritization. Prioritizing competing needs and projects in a short time frame was a challenge, and I think I really did learn a lot on how to manage my time wisely and prioritizing. And the last one just has to do with communication. I learned a lot about asking for feedback often and quickly, especially in a short time frame, and then just being flexible with my expectations and time. Thank you so much. I really appreciate everybody being here and for your attention. If anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, or you can contact me via email or on LinkedIn. Thank you again.
Yes, thank you, Adrienne. That's so wonderful. I think that the recommendations that you have, if implemented, and I know Tofurky is very committed to those goals, it would be amazing to follow up with them in a couple of years to see how it's gone. Yes. And I also, and I know that, the data that you had was just, it was incredibly difficult to figure out at times where to go with it. So I appreciate your perseverance. Are there any questions? John, are you unmuted and did you have a question?
If I'm unmuted, I apologize. And no,
Oh, it just pops up on my screen, so I wasn't sure. Okay, well, that is another great project. A lot of great lessons learned that will definitely carry over. So thank you, Adrienne, and we'll move on to our next presenter, Jason.
Hello, are you able to hear me? Okay.
I hear you.
Perfect. So hi everyone, my name is Jason and I'll be talking about my internship over the summer at Willamette Falls Paper Company. So a little bit about me, as I mentioned before, my name is Jason and I'm currently in my 4th year studying environmental engineering at Oregon State. And I chose environmental engineering mainly just because I've always had an affinity with the outdoors and it presents me with the opportunity to try and preserve our natural environment. So here's a brief overview of what I will be speaking on today. So first I will start with an introduction to Willamette Falls Paper Company, and then I will get into the 2 projects I worked on over the summer, which are the boiler optimization and emissions control project and the effect of paper recycling on wastewater clarification project. And then I will get into my recommendations that came as a result of them. So a little bit about Willamette Falls Paper Company is they're originally named Westland Paper Company, but they closed in 2017. However, they reopened in 2019 and are currently trying to focus on a more sustainable way of paper making. And the image on the left here, it just illustrates an aerial view of the mill as a whole. And then the image on the right here is shows their final product, which is a 2-ton roll of paper that is 4 feet in diameter. So now getting into one of my projects, which is my boiler optimization and emissions control project. So at the mill, the boilers are used to provide steam to power turbines around the mill, and as well as dryer cans to dry the final paper products. So the diagram on this slide is a rough process flow diagram of boiler number 3, and the image on the right is the boiler titled boiler number 3 that just shows the company it was made by and the year it was made in, which is 1947. And despite this, it is still technically the newest boiler at the mill. So on this slide, these are 2 images of the stack of boiler number 3. The one on the left is the stack itself, and the one on the right illustrates the 2 ports that I was intending to tap into to test the emissions. So overall, the objectives of the project were to improve the nitrogen oxide emissions control and to improve the overall efficiency of boiler number 3. And to begin this, I started by looking at previously collected carbon monoxide and NOx emissions data. So, however, about halfway through my internship, my mentor and I concluded that the main goals of this project could not be achieved and were no longer completely viable. So the first being the drastic change in CO emissions that occur with the slight change in NOx emissions. So as shown here, they tend to have an inverse relationship to each other. And this relationship that I created in this chart is highlighted using 2012 data from boiler number 3. And additionally, I was told by an outside source to keep CO levels below 200 ppm, and it increased on multiple days. These are just the averages. And the next is the current efficiency value, and it was estimated by an outside source to be around 80%. However, the mill displays around 90%, and I checked the value with hand calculations, and I came within around 1% of the displayed value. So therefore, given the age of the boiler, the calculated efficiency being higher than the estimated, and the conversations that I had with the boiler plant supervisor, and we concluded that the boiler was operating at peak efficiency. And displayed on this slide are burners for boiler number 3. And this is where I spent a lot of my time studying the boiler and where I originally thought I would be able to adjust the dampers. However, the third reason that the goals of this project could not be met is because I could not experiment with boiler process parameters as was intended. The dampers are either fully opened or closed, and the natural gas flow to the boiler and the strength of the boiler of the burners cannot be changed either. So overall, for the three reasons I stated, the original goals of the project could not be met, and it was determined that boiler number 3 was already operating at peak efficiency. So now as for my second project, which focused on the recycling system at the mill, which pretty much took recycled cardboard boxes, turned them into pulp, and then ultimately into paper. However, with these bales that came in, plastics were entangled within them. And then the diagram on this slide is just to show a rough process flow for the recycling process at the mill. And overall, my goals for this project were to identify the sampling locations at the mill and to develop a methodology to try to quantify the amount of plastics in the system to give a rough idea for a certain amount that are in there for a certain amount of time. And to work towards these objectives, I sampled from 6 locations daily for about 3 weeks. And on the bottom left here is of the clarifier, which is one of my main sampling locations. The upper right is of dewatered sludge, and the bottom right is of the head box of the paper machine that utilized the recycled paper fibers. And on the following slides, I will provide some examples of what resulted from this project. So here's an example of one of the charts that I made. I apologize, it is extremely grainy. But pretty much I want to draw your attention to July 21st and July 22nd. So on July 21st, a large amount of recycled paper was used, but a small amount of plastics were found in the line. And the following day, a large amount of recycled cardboard was used, but a large amount of plastics were found in the line. And this was ultimately due to a new screen that was up and running and that was being tested that day, which is called the detrasher. And just to note, the Johnson screen for these 2 samples utilize where I was able to collect representative samples of the incoming plastics into the mill as a whole. And so on this slide, these are just some images of plastics that I pulled out of the center of the clarifier. The ones on the aluminum plates have already been separated, and mainly the takeaway of this slide was to illustrate just the wide range of plastic amounts that I found in the clarifier. So now into my recommendations that came as a result of my project. The first 2 focus mainly on monitoring plastics in the system. And in doing so, the company can maintain the use as fertilizer and can determine optimal locations for plastic removal within the recycling process. And the second suggestion mentions in combination with plastics prevention measures. So as I was leaving, there were plans for cleaners to be inserted in line in the recycling system at the paper machine. And they are set to pull around 56,000 pounds of plastics annually. And then continuing my recommendations, the first one on this table focuses on addressing the impacts of fully opening a valve that leads from the mill to the clarifier. So the results of fully opening this valve were those results that I previously showed on a slide with the large amounts of plastics in the clarifier. And lastly, I found a company that conducted runs to use removed plastics from paper mills specifically. And they conducted the run in New York, but they have a company they have a few locations in Oregon, and they use those plastics as a source of fuel for cement production. And any questions? And thank you guys for your time.
Yeah, that was quite a shift from your first project and finding out that the 1947 boiler was operating as efficiently as possible, which is good, but kind of shocking that they're still running that one. And I know they have a long lifetime on many of them, but it's kind of funny to see that date. So, oops, sorry about that. So are there any questions before, I don't see any in the chat. Do you see any in the chat? Okay.
No, I don't see
For
any.
some reason they weren't coming through. Okay, well, Jason, great job. And I do want to recognize that Jason had to shift dramatically from his current supervisor to a new supervisor right in the middle of the project. So there were definitely some barriers that he encountered that he just kept moving forward on. So great job, Jason, and thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
Okay, for our last very short presentation, we have a couple of folks from the Washington Department of Ecology to talk just shortly about some of their endeavors to implement an intern program in Washington. So I'm not sure who's going to be on today. Is it Jenny or Miles?
It is Jenny. I don't think
Oh,
Miles.
hello. Okay.
So it's really quick. We are basically copying what Oregon DEQ and Oregon Sea Grant have accomplished. And so we are creating our own internship program at the Washington State in a partnership with Washington Sea Grant. We are starting this coming year with a pilot. We're looking to have 2 businesses to house summer interns in the Puget Sound area. And part of that was because we were really just trying to take advantage of some grants that we had. And so we reallocated some from other projects, as well as just trying on a really short time period to get this off the ground and running. So we're going to focus on 2. And then hopefully for the summer of 2023, we'll be at full scale. And so whether that means we'll have as many interns and projects as Oregon does, we will see. But hopefully you will be hearing more from us and our interns in future roundtables. And our goals for all of our projects would be to looking at safer chemical alternatives, waste reduction, water conservation, energy savings, cost savings, basically looking at that P2 priorities. So.
Yes, well, thank you, Jenny. And I think the common thread that we have here is a Sea Grant. And being able to partner with them to administer the program is huge. And I think having a regional connection with the Washington Sea Grant is just amazing. So I'm really excited that we can continue to partner with them in this way.
Absolutely. And the advantage of working with Sea Grant, since Sea Grant will be the ones administering the money to the interns and directly helping with the placement, is that the businesses will be one step removed from Ecology, who is their regulatory authority. So it gives a little bit of leeway for the businesses and a little bit of security for them as they kind of work towards some of these P2 projects.
That's right. And a lot of the confidential information that they may be nervous about always, and at least from Oregon's standpoint, goes through Sea Grant. So we don't have the issues of, public notice requirements that, even though we can have confidential on them, it just is like you said, one step removed.
Yeah, so that potential of disclosure makes it a little bit more daunting for businesses to work directly with Ecology on projects or internships. But if we can get them to agree to work more closely with Sea Grant, and we can oversee some of the P2 aspects of how their projects are implemented and provide assistance there. And then we're also hoping that with Sea Grant, we're able to reach businesses that our pollution prevention program doesn't traditionally reach, and provide some technical assistance there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a wonderful partnership, and we're so glad that we can have a regional Sea Grant partnership through an internship program. So
we're so lucky, Lisa, that you and Oregon Sea Grant have really paved the way. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, it's not all easy, as you all know. So I did want to just talk for 1 minute about some of the barriers to implementation. And as I think the P2 practitioners on the phone know, business recruitment into any program is a challenge. And we actually start in December, January for the summer term. Some other intern programs actually start much sooner than that, but we have found that that window is enough for us to recruit businesses. And then the other bit of a barrier that we often come to is that the business doesn't really have a full understanding of prevention. Well, they may have understanding of prevention, but then when they give me their project idea, it's often more focused on diversion or recycling of a particular material or whatever it might be, or it's just completely compliance or permit driven. So sometimes we have to steer them into a true prevention project. And then even when we do, sometimes when the intern's on site, it just moves back into that diversion project. So those are some that sometimes has happened. In addition, we do have a pretty significant intern training and business training opportunity to ensure that they understand the terms of pollution prevention, green chemistry, and life cycle assessment. And that knowledge can be steep. That knowledge can be steep for some of our participants. So those are just 3 of some of the minor barriers that we have. So that's it. I think we actually have 7 minutes, which is a great job to all the interns. I know they were really cutting down their content. So first, please give a really big round of applause to the students for coming today to present to a professional audience. They're getting experience with this, but certainly is a little nerve-wracking for them. So give them a big thank you. And then we'll just open it up to questions if there are any. And you can just unmute yourself because I don't think I'm seeing a lot of questions in the chat. I guess, Derek, if you're still here, Nancy asked, was it hard to convince Pacific Seafood to change the sink? Or do you know if they've done that yet? I can't tell if Derek's here. And then if he's not, we'll just keep moving on. What are the major obstacles to recruiting facility hosts? Well, I think I've used a lot of different techniques, but you know, like email, we have an Oasis Gmail account that we use on a regular basis to help them fully understand this is a non-regulatory technical assistance program, but even then it just takes a lot of communication and attending maybe the events that they're going to, like a conference, to talk about the program, and sharing these types of results to show that really big companies are participating. They've had great success. And I think those are some of the ways that we get through that. So, oh yeah, Derek had to go to his class, so. Yeah, so those are, I think it's just, you know, the obstacles are that we're primarily a regulatory agency and they're not used to working with us in a non-compliance way. Yeah. Okay, well, I think we can just move on. Thank you, PPRC and all of the committee members for working so hard to have a very robust program. And I'll turn it back over to Brittany.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you to all of the interns. That was a great session, really engaging, and incredible work, everyone. So we are at our lunch break. So we will break from 12 to 12:30, and we'll come back for some great afternoon sessions. So hope to see you all then. Great. Okay. Welcome back, everyone. Next up, we have a session on alternatives in metal finishing and vapor degreasing and P2 finance, facilitated by Chris Lynch. So Chris, I will pass it over to you.
All right, thank you. Okay, everybody, thanks for sticking it out with us. I know we're on the last afternoon. You know, what we wanted to cover today, looks like we're all having a little bit of technical difficulty, but what we wanted to cover today is, you know, just kind of continue the theme of having the, you know, these real examples of what people have done in their operations to apply green chemistry principles and also just pollution prevention principles. Talk about some case studies from Los Angeles as well as the Pacific Northwest, and then conclude with a discussion about how to, you know, sort of evaluate the true cost and operational savings of environmental upgrades. So let's see. What we're going to do, you know, I think we've been really lucky. If you've been on the conference for the past few days, you know, we've had quite a number of presenters willing to share what's going on in LA with the sanitation and environment department there in Los Angeles. We're lucky to have Miguel Rojas here this afternoon to talk a little bit about what they've been doing in terms of a pilot project to take a look at green chemistry and pollution prevention for the metal finishing sector. So hopefully we've worked through our technical difficulties and I can hand this over to Miguel to share his presentation.
Okay, so you should see my screen, right? Can you see my screen?
We can see you, Miguel.
What about this, my presentation?
I'm not seeing it at the moment.
Okay. About now?
Yes, it's coming up. There
Okay,
you go.
Great. Okay, let's start. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Chris, for the presentation. Introduction. I am Miguel Rodas. I work for LA Sanitation, City of Los Angeles. And this presentation is about pollution prevention and an introduction to green chemistry as an alternative in metal finishing. In this presentation, I will, first of all, for those who are not really familiar with metal finishing operations, I will give a brief introduction on the operations, and then the pollution prevention opportunities within the operations, then how we can mainstream green chemistry, and then how we can advance it. The three pollution prevention compartments within or applied to metal finishing operations, and then the intersections and indicators of green chemistry within the operations, and then the green, one example of the green alternative, which is the trivalent chrome, and what is the work ahead for us in City of Los Angeles. Let me start this part over here. This I was in another mode. You were supposed to see this, and now basically what is metal finishing? We all know that metals get corroded and they lose their strength, and eventually they break up and they lose their structural ability to provide the services, whatever these metals are serving that need. And then metal finishing on the right, a picture of the same chain that was corroded, and then after when it is finishing. This presentation is a little too short to explain everything, but basically you will see in every metal finishing operations or every facility that you go out there, three main steps in this operation. The first one is the surface preparation, perhaps the most important step in metal finishing. And there are two types of how they prepare the surface before they do the actual finishing. So they have physical preparation and also a chemical surface preparation. And by chemical, I mean using inorganic acids, mainly sulfuric acid, nitric acid, other inorganic acids. And physical means for preparing the parts are mostly polishing, mechanical polishers, and buffing materials in order to remove impurities from the surfaces. And then the next step is the actual finishing, which are 6 core operations according to the federal government. And those 6 core operations are electroless plating, electroplating, anodizing, chemical milling and etching, and conversion coating, and finally, the manufacturing of printed circuit boards. And lastly, the post-finishing. Many post-finishing are like a sealing of the finishing, so to enhance the corrosion protection. There are opportunities for pollution prevention in each of these steps. Now, like I said, this presentation is a little too short to cover all that, but just to highlight that there are opportunities, pollution prevention opportunities, and even indicators of green chemistry within each of these steps. So what is green chemistry? Actually, the definition by EPA, and also we all know Paul Anastas, who is the father of green chemistry, apply that green chemistry is the design of new chemical products and processes by using the 12 principles, which I am not presenting over here, but basically the green chemistry as it is, it was intended for the chemist working at the lab so they can design and conceive new chemical products that would be less hazardous, less toxic, and less deleterious for human health and the environment. Now, in this presentation, and this is the work we are doing at City of Los Angeles, is using the extended definition of green chemistry by the Green Chemistry and Commerce Council. That extended definition covers every element of a business, from the feeding materials to the operations through all the finished products. So that including the ways the company manage their businesses. So that definition or the extended definition is more comprehensive and give us an opportunity to find several ways to mainstream green chemistry. And those ways are by finding material substitution, process substitutions, practices also that may be just maintenance, operation and maintenance that may be covered or look at under the green chemistry and the extended definition of green chemistry. Excuse my stumbling right there. And also basically improving all the operations and maintenance. So the way I see it is that within each compartment of a facility, especially in metal finishing, we find water conservation, which is here highlighted by the blue compartment. The green aspect would be all measures intended to reduce the chemicals of concern. And on the brownish compartment, that will be the operation and maintenance. within each of these compartments, if we look with great details, and that will require to go into the SDS, the main ingredients of each chemical used within the metal finishing operation, we will find indicators of green chemistry. So the indicators of green chemistry will be found within the intersections of these main compartments. And I will provide at least one example of that, as I said before. And again, the main, so far in our pollution prevention checklist that we are developing, we are including pollution prevention practices that belong to process substitution, material substitutions. The one example that I have for you is the trivalent chrome chemistries. And especially in California right now, the California Air Resources Board is trying to phase out facilities that are engaged in hard chrome, decorative chrome, or anodizing using chromic acid. Why? Because they believe that hex chrome, and not only they believe, but it has been proven already that hex chrome chemistries are really carcinogenic. They are very, very dangerous type of chemicals, and they impact greatly not only the environment, but also the workers in front of this type of plating tanks. So there are health and safety issues, as you can see. So with trivalent chrome, we remove those health and safety issues, or at least we make them with lesser impact. And there are also benefits on pretreatment and at the regulatory level. When the California Air Resources Board is when they're pushing these regulations, they believe that the new facilities or the facilities will benefit by removing the need to pre-treat the wastewater generated during the steps that I just told you. And as you all know, maybe you don't know, metal finishers are really chemical intense environment, and also they rely on the use of water, significant amount of use of waters, and this water needs eventually to be disposed into the sewer line, and therefore they need to meet effluent limitations stipulated by the federal government. And then, so not only EPA has already awarded a green chemistry award for trivalent chrome chemistries, but also the TRI, or the Toxic Release Inventory, has already recognized the use of trivalent chemistries as a green activity. So what we are working right now at City of Los Angeles, and this is our work ahead, is first of all is mainstream green chemistry. How we are doing that? First of all, promoting or advancing the technologies that is behind. One of our main purposes with City of Los Angeles is bring information to facilities that many of them don't have. And also through this type of webinars that we offer, we try to bring a development of their workforces, and also promoting more environmental management systems so they can become greener with their operations. Operations and maintenance and production lines, also removing very empiric ways of doing wastewater treatment by implementing best available technology pretreatment system, and implement recovery of processed bath constituents. One of the main problems in metal finishing operation is the drag outs. And drag outs is the chemical solutions that come from the process tanks into the rinses. Just today, I went to one facility, And I observed that the workers are not implementing a drag out reduction. I talked to the manager, owner of the facility, and I said, look, you are losing valuable process chemical solution because your workers are not doing the proper drag out reduction. And it just take a couple of minutes to hang the parts, let it drip as much as possible to reduce drag out. That will include also the quality of the products and also decrease the rejects. And then wastewater treatment, again, we are promoting automatic systems versus manual systems, inclusion of technology to conserve water, and this will help them also in health and safety issues. Many metal finishers have reported to me workers' comp cases related to these environments, related to operation and maintenance that owners of facilities need to take care of, so they can remove that liability and make more savings for them. And also community relations, environmental justice issues. Our City of Los Angeles is also through LA Industry Program, we are promoting these issues. So especially in metal finishing operations and all other industrial sectors, so they can have or enhance their relations with their surrounding communities. I think I'm almost close to 15 minutes. If I have a little more, probably we can cover during question and answers. So that concludes my presentation.
All right, great. Thank you very much, Miguel. And I think what we'll do here, we've got 4 speakers covering 3 different topics. So we'll hold off the questions until the very end. And with that, we'll go ahead and move on to our next speaker. So our next speaker is going to be Katie Wolf. And again, if you've been on the past few days, you probably heard references to Katie and some of the work that she has been doing in terms of pollution prevention and looking for safer alternatives and safe substitutes for different toxic chemicals that are used in various production processes. And so we're lucky to have Katie. She's going to be talking about some case studies in vapor degreasing and looking for alternatives to some of the current products used in vapor degreasing, safer from the environmental side. But, you know, as always with anything Katie does, it's also a lot of powerful information in terms of not only the environmental benefits, but also the cost benefits. So Katie, we'll let you go ahead and share your screen.
Sorry, it's taking me a second. Can everybody see that now?
Yes, it's up.
Yes, we can see you.
Great. So hi, everybody. I'm going to talk today about case studies of safer alternatives to vapor degreasing solvents, as Chris said. And there are many different types of operations that rely on vapor degreasing, and they include metals processing, electronics, and aerospace. The solvents most commonly used in vapor degreasing operations include the 4 I've listed on this slide. The 3 chlorinated solvents, trichloroethylene or TCE, perchloroethylene or PERT, and methylene chloride or MC, and also N-propylbromide or NPB, a brominated solvent. The safer alternatives I'm going to discuss are appropriate for applications using any of the solvents. I worked with 6 different companies in 2 projects for the case studies I'll discuss today. There were 4 companies in the PPRC project, which was sponsored by EPA Region 10, and there were 2 companies in the project sponsored by the Hazard Evaluation System and Information Service, which is part of the California Department of Public Health. In all 6 cases, the companies were using N-propylbromide. And that isn't very surprising, since many regulatory agencies and P2 providers have recommended that companies switch away from the 3 chlorinated solvents to N-propylbromide in the last decade or so. So half of the companies I worked with ended up converting to the alternatives, and I completed work with the other half of the companies, but they didn't make the conversion within the time frame of the project. The first case study I'll talk about is a company called MAPSCO in the Seattle area. This company offers non-destructive testing services to aerospace companies. The type of non-destructive testing the company performs is called magnetic particle inspection. In magnetic particle inspection, you use a fluid that contains magnetic particles and you magnetize it. You place the part in the fluid, and if there's a flaw or crack in the part, the magnetic particles will line up next to it so you can identify where it is, you can repair the part rather than discarding it. Historically, the company used a large N-propyl bromide vapor degreaser for cleaning the parts. We tested the company's parts with a water cleaner supplier, a company called Brulin, and we identified a suitable cleaner that the company was already using in other parts of the facility. The parts were cleaned effectively in the Brulin lab in an immersion agitation system. So accordingly, I sent in an equipment supplier to quote the cost of this type of system, but the company felt the cost was too high. MAPSCO did find a secondhand system, but it was purchased by another company before they could buy it. So I got in gear then and found another place that was offering a secondhand system of the type that was originally quoted. And MAPSCO bought it and has been using it for close to a year now. This slide shows a picture of the non-destructive testing stand. The vapor degreaser is shown in the picture on the right. The bottom picture shows the water cleaning system the company purchased. It has a wash, a rinse, and a dry section. As you see from the picture, it also has an automated system for indexing the baskets from one bath to the next. This slide shows the annualized cost comparison for MAPSCO. I generally use an annualized cost for comparing the cost of using the vapor degreaser on the one hand and the cost of using the water-based cleaning system on the other hand, because it's easy to understand. I'm not going to be able to discuss the assumptions I made to do the cost analysis and comparison for MAPSCO or the other case study companies I discussed today because of time constraints. I do discuss 4 of them in more detail in the PPRC document I give you the link for on the earlier slide. And I did include them here because I did want to give you a flavor for all of the case studies. And as you see from the total cost figures here for MAPSCO was able to reduce their cost of cleaning by 26% by converting to the water cleaning system. The second company I'll discuss is Exotic Metals Forming. They make ducting of all kinds for aerospace and industrial applications. The company used a large N-propyl bromide vapor degreaser for many years. Exotic is subject to a whole range of aerospace requirements and also to the European Union REACH requirements. We did testing with a water cleaner supplier and identified a good alternative, and the company ended up converting to that cleaner for this operation and for most of their other water cleaning operations in their facility. The company was able to use one of their existing immersion agitation systems for cleaning the parts that had gone through the vapor degreaser previously. So they didn't have to purchase a new cleaning system at all. We also worked on a related process that involved using an anti-spatter product in a laser cutting operation. On the top left of this slide, the picture shows one of the company's parts, which, as you see, can be very complex. The picture on the right shows the vapor degreaser Exotic used. The bottom picture shows a fixture the company engineer designed for testing the anti-spatter alternatives. On this slide, the picture here on the left shows the immersion agitation system cleaner bath and the 2 rinse baths that follow it. The picture on the right shows a temporary pressure washer rinsing station the company needs to use after the 2 other rinses. Exotic plans to purchase a better pressure washer station in the future. This slide shows the annualized cost comparison for the cleaning operation. Again, I don't have time to describe the derivation of the numbers, but the total figures in the table show that the company reduced their cost of cleaning by 81% through the conversion, and that's highly significant. This slide shows the cost comparison for using the N-propyl bromide anti-spatter and an alternative water-based anti-spatter Exotic ended up adopting. We did test a number of commercially available water anti-spatter products, but none performed well enough for their process. So I then asked Brulin, the water cleaner supplier, if they would try to formulate a water-based anti-spatter. And even though they had never made such a product before, they decided to take on the challenge. And they were able to make a water-based anti-spatter, which was really great. And they also conducted all the testing necessary for satisfying the aerospace requirements. The company converted to this product and it reduced the cost for the anti-spatter process by 71%, again, significant. I also worked with a plating company on the PPRC project. The company, a job shop, used an N-propyl bromide vapor degreaser for cleaning polishing compounds from parts made of a variety of substrates. Polishing compounds are really difficult to remove, and I knew we'd need an aggressive water cleaner and that we'd have to use an ultrasonic cleaning system for the parts. We did testing with a water cleaner supplier and found a suitable cleaner. I then arranged for 2 equipment suppliers to provide quotes, and the company's evaluating them, but they didn't make a conversion within the time frame of the project. This slide shows the variety of parts the company must clean on the left. On the right, the picture shows the inside of the vapor degreaser, which is lowered into the floor of the facility. The picture on the bottom shows the ultrasonic system I used to do the cost comparison. Now this slide shows the cost comparison, and again, I'm not going to go into the figures. The total values in this case show that the company would reduce their cost by 39% if they made the conversion to a water cleaner. The last company I worked with in the PPRC project was a tube manufacturer who made a small diameter tubes that are used to transfer liquids and gases from one place to another in aircraft. And the company had a really old vapor degreaser when I started working with them. I don't think I've seen one like that for probably 35 years. And they converted to a new, tighter vapor degreaser shortly thereafter. Again, we found an appropriate water cleaner. And another similar company in Southern California that I knew about had converted to an ultrasonic immersion system some years ago. But the equipment supplier and I thought we could use a different operation that would be less costly. We did testing in a spray cabinet with a specially designed fixture to flush the insides of the tubes, and it worked successfully. The equipment supplier quoted both an ultrasonic system and a spray cabinet, and as expected, the cost of the spray cabinet was the lower of the 2 quotes. The company's evaluating the quotes, but again, didn't convert within the time frame of the project. This slide shows pictures of some of the different types of tubes the company makes. And on the bottom right, it shows the spray cabinet we did the testing of one of the tubes in. Again, I won't go into the costs for the tube manufacturer, but you'll note in this case, the cost of converting to the water cleaning system is actually higher than the cost of continuing to use the vapor degreaser. In the HESIS project, I worked with 2 companies, and one was a microelectronics manufacturer. The microelectronics were used in medical devices, so the company was subject to FDA requirements. They used a thick film deposition process in their manufacturing, and they needed to remove particles and handling soils several times during the process. They'd used an N-propyl bromide vapor degreaser for many years for cleaning the parts from this process. Partway through the project, I learned they had a water cleaning process for removing flux from printed circuit boards. Although the cleaner they were using for this was not necessarily an ideal cleaner for the thick film deposition parts, I thought it would really be worthwhile to try using it anyway. We did the testing and the defluxing cleaner worked very well. I provided the company with information on the problems with N-propyl bromide so they could give them to the FDA, and they gave them that information and the quality control information from the cleaning tests, and the FDA did end up approving their ability to use the defluxing cleaner. The company did the conversion and didn't need to purchase a new system or a different cleaner. and they reduce their costs significantly through the conversion. The picture on the left of this slide shows some of the microelectronics devices the company makes. The picture on the right shows the vapor degreaser the company used. The last company I'll discuss is a job shop that makes optical components. The company uses materials like pitch and wax to polish the components, and those contaminants are really difficult to remove. They've been using an N-propyl bromide vapor degreaser for several years. And I've worked with some companies in years past in California, in Southern California, and I'd helped them convert to a soy-based cleaning process, which is really good at removing those types of contaminants. I asked an ultrasonic system manufacturer to test the company's parts, and the soy cleaner, followed by a water-based cleaner, did clean the parts effectively. I arranged for 2 equipment suppliers to quote systems, and the company's evaluating the quotes, but again, didn't yet make the conversion. I did the cost comparison based on the company purchasing the system with the larger baths, because it wouldn't need to be changed out as often. The picture on the top left of this slide shows the pitch, an asphalt-like material that the company has to clean, very difficult to clean. The picture on the right shows the N-propyl bromide vapor degreaser. The bottom picture shows one of the components the company makes. The cost comparison in this case shows the company would be able to reduce their cost of cleaning somewhat if they were to convert to the soy-based cleaning alternative. This slide shows some of the issues that arise when you work with companies on alternatives. Companies really often start out wanting a drop-in alternative, but there really aren't any, and that don't pose health and environmental problems of their own. If the companies have always used vapor degreasing, they're often skeptical that water cleaners will even work. And I've found that testing with water cleaner suppliers and water equipment suppliers can definitely dispel those fears. The suppliers will do all the testing for companies for free because they want their business. And the suppliers will often also do the testing to get suitable cleaners aerospace approved. But there are many cleaners that already do have aerospace approval. Another issue is cost. I try to make the alternative cleaning systems as low cost as possible. No one wants to pay more than they have to for cleaning. One of the companies I worked with ended up buying that secondhand system that I mentioned, and we tested the spray cabinet, which was cheaper than the ultrasonic system for the tube manufacturer. Finally, when I worked in Southern California, where they have a robust regulatory regime, companies were more open to converting. In other locations, there are few, if any, regulations, and I found there's very little incentive to convert, even when you can show companies it's cost effective to do so. Vaccine mandates, as we all know now, work, and banning toxic chemicals also works. They did ban these chemicals in open-top vapor degreasers in Southern California 2 decades ago, and other states and localities and EPA need to institute similar bans now. Just to conclude then, water-based cleaners are viable alternatives, and they're appropriate for the vast majority of companies using vapor degreasing today. Other safer alternatives, like the soy cleaner, for instance, are suitable in certain cases. There isn't ever going to be a magic answer, and you have to actually know a lot to guide companies properly, so they won't be heavily influenced by certain vendors who want to sell them inappropriate or unsafe alternatives. Finally, there's been a lot of switching from one solvent to another, as each solvent has been increasingly regulated over the years. And really the best option for companies at this point is to find a permanent solution, so they don't have to go along with that shell game any longer. Here's my contact information. Please feel free to call or email me if you have questions about a solvent operation of any kind, not just vapor degreasing, any kind of solvent operation. And thanks very much for your attention, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have at the end of the session, as Chris said.
All right, thank you, Katie. That was great. It's always good to get those real life examples and get the data that you're able to share. So thank you very much. And, at the beginning, I know we were having some technical difficulties, so I probably didn't do a good job introducing myself. So I'm Chris Lynch, and I'm with the Nevada Business Environmental Program. We are a, technical assistance provider in the state of Nevada, statewide program. We provide compliance assistance as well as pollution prevention assistance and, general sustainability assistance to businesses. So, I think the question is, as you hear from Miguel and you hear from Katie and you hear about businesses thinking about change, how do we as technical assistance providers help to demonstrate the financial benefits of pollution prevention or green chemistry changes? Or how do we provide tools to our customers so that they can run the numbers themselves and, try to determine whether something makes sense for them or not? And I'm sure that a lot of you are in the similar position as myself, that, as you're talking with different environmental health and safety type folks at a facility, they may need to go up higher in the chain to make their arguments. And so, it's also, how do you calculate and prove out that, change will be beneficial, that, the cost savings, the operational savings are there. So, how do you prove to the managers, to the CFOs that a change is necessary, especially if it's not being driven by an environmental regulatory requirement? And so, with that, what I'd like to do is introduce Bert Hamner and Eric Bell, who are going to talk a little bit about some of the tools that we and our customers can use to take a look at financing for pollution prevention projects. So go ahead, Bert and Eric.
Okay, can you hear me? This is Bert Hamner.
Yes, we can hear you, Bert.
But we can't see you. You can't see me. That's interesting. Okay, well, you don't need to. Start my video. All right. Okay, I'm just going to jump into sharing my screen. That's the fastest way to get through this. Tell me if you can see it or not. There we go. And visible?
Not yet. Yes.
Great. Okay. Very briefly, Bert Hamner, live in Seattle, and in 1991, I joined the Washington Department of Ecology's Toxics Reduction Group to do pollution prevention planning technical assistance. And I have an MBA as well as a master's in environmental studies. And so I was given the exciting job of creating environmental management accounting guidelines with groups like Boeing and the Foster School of Business, and became very involved with financial analysis, metrics, and doing it right, because we found a lot of things that companies were doing wrong. In the 1990s, we found out through technical assistance, many organizations turning down valuable P2 investments because they are doing their accounting wrong. And they're using the wrong capital expense or CapEx analysis to measure profitability. The first thing is that companies tend to, and still do, treat compliance and environmental management as overhead. And what that tends to do, of course, is it makes the clean parts of the operation subsidize the dirty parts of the operation, because it's spread across everybody. And that leads to internal cost distortion. But basically what it means is treating environmental management and compliance as overhead subsidizes pollution, because the polluting parts aren't paying as much as they should. Furthermore, the CapEx templates that companies use to evaluate potential investments don't recognize new compliance costs, and therefore they don't realize the benefits, the cost benefits of preventing those costs. When the numbers are not captured by the accounting system, they won't show up in an investment analysis. The third thing that's really important to understand is that discount rates don't reflect risk reduction from pollution prevention. And so pollution prevention investments have a lower apparent net present value. In other words, by treating the risks as the same in both alternatives, it makes P2 look more expensive than it really is. But in fact, it's reducing risk. So logically, it means that should lead to using a lower discount rate for our analysis. But the bottom line here is that we're being polluted a lot more than is even economically efficient, because people are doing their math and accounting wrong. So what about that? So the US EPA in 1995 published a manual called Introduction to Environmental Management Accounting for Business Decisions. It's still a brilliant and useful publication. You can download it as a PDF. It was imitated quite quickly by the Institute of Management Accountants, who said, why are people letting the EPA lead accounting education? But then that also led to another form of improving investment analysis. And in 1996, the TELUS Institute was retained by EPA to develop what's called P2 Finance, a software in Excel and a manual on how to do it. And the other critical publication then was from the New England Waste Management Officers Association, NUMOA. I highly recommend this publication, Strategic and Financial Assessment of Pollution Prevention Investments. And it goes through all the critical tools necessary to do this right. So I'm going to talk about P2 Finance. And so this is the user manual for the publication. It came out in 1996. I thought it was brilliant, but the EPA and TELUS really never promoted it very much. So very few people even knows this exists. What it does is it lets you compare financial metrics for three scenarios. There's a base case, what are you doing now? And then one or two, up to two alternatives. And what it gives you as an output is based on the data you put in, it produces the net present value and the internal rate of return, and also a discounted payback. And organizations treat these numbers in different ways. There's opinions about what they really mean, but we really focus on net present value as ultimately the best way to do it, where you're using a discount rate to measure a flow of cash in the future. Now, what it contains is default parameters for time value of money, inflation, discount rates, income tax rates, and depreciation. And then for each scenario, you have a name, an investment year, a lifetime, and a start and end. And those parameters set up an automatic spreadsheet, which then starts with a cost inventory for the initial investment. And so what they've done here is specifically try to overcome the problem of recognizing compliance costs. So here they've got utility connections, which all cost money, and site preparation and installation and startup training and permitting, and a lot of things that are typically left out of CapEx analysis, although they can be very expensive. So because they leave them out, they don't know how much their situations are actually costing them. And there's also another pre-planned, pre-programmed inventory of operating costs. So you've got your direct materials, utilities, labor, and then waste management, which is often left out of the analysis, and regulatory compliance. And all of these change. For example, when you switch away from vapor degreasing over to water-based cleaning, this stuff tends to go away to a great extent, but it's not showing up in the accounting and the analysis. So this is already put into P2 Finance with the goal of making sure you don't forget to include these, even if they're real. So this is what the actual spreadsheets look like. This is a screenshot of the Excel software. So it's alternative 1, and then there's 2 other alternatives, the base and alternative 2, and you fill in the blanks. Okay, so you've got a method of depreciation, a year and a lifetime, and here are those pre-programmed variables. You can add more, and you will, but these are in there to make sure you don't forget them so that you do your math wrong. And this is operating costs of the same alternative scenario 1. Again, it's pre-programmed so you don't forget them. And then it'll do is it'll produce a scenario summary. It'll produce the cost, salvage value, investment year, and you have your methods of analyzing them for both operating and investment. And from there, it'll collect a tax deduction schedule, which the accountants and finance people will care a lot about, and an incremental cash flow analysis over the years. And then finally, a profitability analysis. And there's your net present value, your internal rate of return, and your discounted payback rather. So it does all of this for you. And I'm sure Kate Wolf is just sitting there going, boy, that would have been handy to use. Why can't I have it? The problem is that P2 Finance is broken. It has not been updated as a software since 1996. It was done in like Excel 2.0, and now we're up to Excel, I don't know what, 15. The macros don't work anymore, and it was never updated over time. So it needs a bottom-up rebuild before we can use it. And it's designed so you can't adjust the discount rates to reflect different types of risks of alternatives, and that needs to be fixed. The cost inventories need to be updated. The user interface should be improved. And finally, new sustainability metrics should be included because we have those now from the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board. And some of those metrics include, for example, carbon emissions. So the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board has developed key metrics for 77 industry sectors. And here is their universe of concerns for sustainability for business, and specifically for publicly traded companies in the USA. And they've broken them down into many subsets. And they've done this for 77 different sectors, and each sector is different. So here we have, for example, in the insurance industry, accounting metrics for the physical impacts of climate change. Total money losses attributable to insurance payouts from modeled catastrophes and non-modeled catastrophes, et cetera. So here's an opportunity now, if we rebuild P2 Finance, to include metrics on sustainability that are now being adopted across the board by large corporations, especially those that are publicly reporting. So what's going on here is that, well, as I said, Bert Hammer and I have been doing this since 1994. Now I'm teaching sustainability accounting online. And my MBA classmate, Eric Bell, who's an Excel programmer and tool builder, and we've launched a project to rebuild the software to the latest Excel venture to include SASB metrics, sustainability metrics, and the cost inventory, where you, the user, can just select which business sector, in this case, it'd be metal finishing, and those metrics automatically populate the cost inventories. So you can customize it for one of 77 sectors. It will allow us to use variable discount rates so we can reflect relative risks and improve the interface for easier use. So I'm going to turn this over to Eric now, and whoever's in charge of doing that, I hope you can stop. I'll stop my share, and there you are, Eric.
I'm in charge. So thank you, Bert. And while I'm getting this set up, I'm going to drop my contact info into the chat with my LinkedIn address. Anybody's feel free to reach out to me. Before I launch in the model, I'm very cognizant of the time considerations. I'm going to be moving very fast today, but I want to thank Katie and Miguel for sharing the case studies, because I live in the world of spreadsheets, which is very abstract. And I don't think I'm sharing the right screen. Yeah, okay. Yes, I am. And so it's nice to see some actual industry level things like actual parts and machinery that the numbers represent. Can you see the model? Am I sharing the right screen? Yeah. Hello?
We see the project configuration.
Perfect. Okay, great. I just got a message from Chris saying I have 5 minutes, so I'll try to bring this in. So I'm going to start with what the results look like. And keep in mind, this is a work in progress. I've been working on this part-time for free, trying to come up with a good user experience, trying to learn this area so that I can come up with a good solution where there's a really shallow learning curve, but also trading that off against having some good functionality and feature richness. So that's, of course, in any sort of software, that's what you're trying to do. So we'll start with the results, because this is where we're in. Everything is a placeholder here. There's nothing real here. On the results, we've got, first off, we're looking in terms of scenarios. So just as with P2 Finance, they had scenarios, we also have scenarios, but the difference is that my model can have multiple numbers of scenarios. It's not fixed to 3. If you want a 4th scenario, you just add a new scenario. I'm showing 3 here: status quo, convert to solar, and convert to wind. And just like with P2 Finance, we'll show some stuff with IRR and payback, discounted payback, and things like that. But the real meal deal here is the net present value. And this is one of the things when Bert approached me, he talked about, I want to have a risk-adjusted NPV along with a base NPV calculated with a baseline cost of capital. So here you have a company-wide cost of capital that's applied to the scenario cash flows in order to get a net present value. And then we're working up a way to have a risk-adjusted cost of capital that's specific to the scenario, so that you can just calculate a risk-adjusted NPV as well. And Bert already spoke to that, so I won't go into any detail on what that means. On the lower left here, you have a chart, a summary chart showing you and the net present value that's calculated with the risk-adjusted discount rate for each of the 3 scenarios. And then on the right here, which is, I like this chart. This is a sensitivity analysis. So you can actually see if I were to vary the discount rate by varying the risk, how would the various scenarios change in terms of which one's most beneficial, and it also shows the baseline cost of capital. So that's the summary type of results. Of course, you'll have all the projections and things that you can visualize. I don't have that mocked up here. So let's look at the workflow now, starting from the very beginning. So we'll start at the project inputs, project configurations, your basic type of stuff, project title, what's your time horizon, how many years in the model, in other words, what currency are you using, because this is not specific to dollars. And then right now I've got inflation rate and a baseline cost of capital. Okay, so far so good. We also have a cost and conversions or a global parameters worksheet here that allows you to enter various costs that are applied across the model uniformly. So if you need to make a change to a cost, a unit cost, you just change it in one place. And that makes it, number one, it easier, but also makes it, reduces the chance of error because you're only putting in the value in one place. We haven't worked this out, but I'm thinking about things like, oh, you can specify the type, it's a unit value, it's a currency conversion, there's the number itself, and then I'm playing around with some ways of expressing the unit so the model can actually help the user not make mistakes by actually checking units. I've done a little bit of experimentation with that. Bert wanted me to call out these things because we're not always focused on cost. Sometimes we're looking at revenue sources as well. So if you're generating carbon credits that you can sell, you have a way to capture those in the model. And just this morning, I thought, well, wait a minute, you might be able to sell the credits for less than it costs you to buy. So it's worth calling that out, that idea that you might have a buy side and a sell side. Here's a specific example that's going to come up from the SASB home builders, where you have an number of infill lots. So we have to get assign a value to that. So moving on, this is the real heart. This is the real heart. This was in addition to the risk adjusted discount rates, Bert really, he was focused on integrating sustainability metrics into the P2 finance model. So you have metric groups, you load them, and it loads a preset set of metrics in that you can then activate, and those become active in your model. So for example, here you have the EPA model metrics group loaded. But if I go back here and I go down to home builders and I load that group, now when I go to the metrics, you see we have the metrics for the SASB home builders industry. If you click on it, there's a hover over that shows you details about this. And then you can activate metrics. So far, so good. You can do some filtering. So if you just want to see the ones that are active in your model, you don't have to look at all the inactive ones. Go to the scenarios page. This allows you to manage the scenarios. You can add and delete scenarios, and it also gives you navigation buttons to the individual components of each scenario. So for example, if I go to the metrics for the status quo scenario, here you see the metrics coming from the EPA model. Here are the ones coming from the SASB industry specific one. You can apply a cost. Here are your projections. So for example, if you're using biodiesel, this is the number of gallons per year. You assign a cost associated with that, and that will in turn generate your operating cash flows. You've already seen this. Bert wanted me to include that screenshot of the P2 finance model. So here you have operating costs that you've entered, that users have entered specifically, but parameterized by start year, end year, initial amount, and then the model calculates for you. But you also have this set of cash flows that are driven by the sustainability metrics that we activated. Last but not least, you've got the capital investments. Again, this is a screenshot of the P2 finance model, and you can add and delete investments. And we haven't done this, but we could have preloaded sets like you have here. I've actually typed these in, but just like we load metric groups, we could have sets of capital investments, and you just select what you want, and it populates the model. So all of this is data driven and software driven. There's nothing fixed in it. And well, that was fast. I brought it in. I'm done.
All right, great. Thank you very much, Eric and Bert. So with that, do we have any questions for the presenters this afternoon?
Hi, Eric. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, Paul Fabiniak, Washington State Department of Ecology. I'm in the P2 program in Northwest Regional Office. Question
Hi.
is this, hi, thanks for building this this new system here. I'm just curious, is this something you're going to be using in, as a consultant and allowing people to use for specific projects, or is this something you're going to be building to release to the world and any P2 people who want to use it?
My guess, Bert, why don't you take that question?
Sure. No, we are going to release it to the world, but we want to do it in partnerships, so it's done strategically. And what that means is we want people to be finding and downloading this spreadsheet from within the P2 programs that are out there. I mean, we could just put it up online and offer it for sale for $25. The problem is that doesn't teach people who the P2 community is. So we want to make sure that it's available as widely as possible, but we don't want to have it available outside the P2 Technical Assistance Network so that people just don't know you exist. Does that make sense?
Makes great sense. No, I like that. I like that approach. Thanks.
Sure.
I guess follow-up question, when do you anticipate it being ready for prime time?
Well, that opens up for the very last slide that I didn't get to put on the screen, but we had been working on this as a labor of love for a couple of months to get it as far as it is. And to finish it, Eric is running out of free time, I think that's fair to say. He makes a living programming Excel spreadsheets, but they got to get paid. So what we're looking for right now is an agency to sponsor and fund the rest of the development. It's to the tune of maybe $5,000 or $6,000, so that we don't have to pay for this out of our own missed income. And then that'll also lead to the opportunity to create an official advisory group for the development of the software, because we're sitting here making these decisions on our own. Much rather be doing this in partnership with, for example, the P2 West Steering Committee members. In particular, some of the advantages that we see here is that we can now start including carbon and carbon emissions in the analysis of scenarios, because that's getting right into climate accounting and carbon accounting that's being used widely now for the larger corporations, and certainly for big industrial companies that are looking at process changes. Absolutely necessary to figure out what's the relative carbon impact between two different alternatives. And we can build that in. It's just going to take extra time and effort. And when it's released to the world, we want it to be released with stamps of approval from P2 organizations. That's why that's the credibility it needs to have. So going forward, if anybody is interested, you can contact me online. I'll put my website in here. It's cleantechmentor.com. And let me know if you're interested in having more discussion. In particular, let me know if you're interested in being on like an advisory group, so we can bounce ideas off you and content and help us develop this the way it should be, which is as a communal effort that has wide application.
All right, thanks, Bert. And another question came in for Katie. Is Brulin now selling the anti-spatter product that they created?
Yes, they are. And it's a really good product, and it's significantly cheaper than the solvent-borne anti-spatter products that are on the market. Yeah, right. I can put you in. I mean, if you call me or email me, I can give you who to contact at Brulin to get more information if you want.
Okay, great. Well, with that, we'll wrap up. I know the next session, we're down to the end here. We've got the last session coming up. I'll turn it over back to Brittany.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you everyone for your great presentations and discussion. Next up, we have leveraging climate disasters to increase P2 adoption, and that will be facilitated by Ben Jarvis.
Afternoon, good seeing everybody again. Brittany, do you know, I couldn't see if Steve had joined us yet. Steve, are you out there? So I didn't see him in there, but I saw the rest of our panel. So maybe here's hoping that he's able to join us as we get underway. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to give everybody a little bit of context for this discussion, but we've convened a panel of experts who are working on business resiliency. And so when we put this together, we had a lot of interesting climate related events that happened. So, this summer we had a heat wave of historic proportions, one that was cited by scientists as a once in a millennium event in the Pacific Northwest, and that would be outside of the range of possibility without human caused climate change. It sent temperatures soaring to over 116 degrees in Portland. It was toppling all-time highs from Oregon to interior British Columbia, resulted in nearly 800 fatalities, and it strained electric transmission and distribution infrastructure as demand soared for cooling needs. And then only a short few weeks later, we had the bootleg fire in Southern Oregon, which exploded into a 400,000 acre conflagration and then threatened a severe critical transmission line that carried electricity produced on the Columbia River to California during the hottest part of the year. And so these events were really quickly replaced in the headlines with other severe weather events: major drought in the Southwest, hurricanes and flooding on the Gulf Coast and in the Northeast. Rivers in the West are hotter, drier, more polluted. They're limiting their ability to accept waste from businesses. Air quality has become increasingly choked with smoke from Western wildfires. Demand for electricity has risen as cooling needs have increased. And climate change is just causing major disruption to businesses right now. So is there an opportunity to work strategically with the businesses that are being impacted by these major events to implement pollution prevention solutions that also improve resiliency in the wake of these calamities? So we've convened this panel to talk about these questions, and we have with us, and I'm going to give each of them a couple of minutes to introduce themselves and their work. Tiffany Skogstrom from the Massachusetts Office of Technical Assistance, Bogdan Sarabanescu from the City of Los Angeles, Kristen Vandermolen from the Desert Research Institute, and Steve Frisch from the Sierra Business Council. And Tiffany, I want to send it to you first. Could you give us a couple minute introduction? Tell us who you are and a little bit about the work that you're doing with the Massachusetts OTA.
Great. Yes, thank you. And I'm very excited to be here on this panel with other people working on climate change. Our needs in Massachusetts are a little bit different than yours. We had a nor'easter a couple of days ago that had 90-mile-per-hour winds on the Cape, and some businesses are without power in the state as of today. So my name is Tiffany Skogstrom, and I'm the director of the Massachusetts Office of Technical Assistance, and otherwise known as OTA. And we were created by the Massachusetts Toxics Use Reduction Act, or otherwise known as TURA, which is a state law that requires that manufacturers under certain state industrial classification codes report to the state, pay a fee, and every 2 years do a toxics use reduction plan if they use threshold levels of chemicals on the TURA list. And so our office was created by the Act to create or to provide free and confidential technical assistance to Massachusetts toxics users. A few years ago, we got a grant from the EPA to design a curriculum for first responders and Massachusetts toxics users to identify their vulnerabilities in order to reduce the risk of industrial accidents that are caused by severe weather. And so now that is part of our regular program offerings, helping people look at toxics use reduction and as a method of preventing climate change related accidents. So thanks for including us today. It's nice to be here.
Thank you so much for being here, Tiffany. Bogdan, how about you? Can you tell us about yourself and the work you're doing for City of LA?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Yes, my name is Bogdan Serbanescu. I'm an environmental compliance inspector with City of Los Angeles, Sanitation and Environment Department, Industrial Waste Management Division. I have bachelor degree in biology and environmental science. As an ECI, I perform inspection of the facility within City of Los Angeles, implementing and enforcing local, state, and federal laws governing the discharge of industrial wastewater. So I work closely with the businesses to find ways to reduce water consumption, reuse, and recycle. As we know, and as Ben mentioned earlier, this year was the driest year like in history. I know Nevada, Lake Mead, reached the lowest level ever in history. So as far as I know, the federal government implements some new rules regarding the use of waters. So as far as we know, California get a lot of water from Nevada, actually from Colorado River. So as all of us, we need to, take care of the environment and try to reuse the water sources as much as we can. Thank you. And
Thank you
for
so much,
inviting me.
Bogdan. Kristen.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kristen Vandermolen. I'm an assistant research professor at the Desert Research Institute in Reno, Nevada. And I work primarily on topics related to the human dimensions of climate change. And the project that's relevant to this discussion is one that looks at the impacts of wildfire to small and medium-sized businesses in the Sierra Nevada. It's a project that some colleagues and I are conducting in collaboration with the Sierra Business Council, which is a nonprofit organization that provides business support throughout the Sierra Nevada. And it's a two-part project. The first part is survey focused. So we've just concluded that part. We sent a survey out across businesses in the Sierra Nevada to create baseline understanding of the impacts of wildfire, either direct fire, wildfire threat, wildfire smoke, or associated public safety power shutoffs. So the impacts of those two businesses, and then also to generate some baseline understanding of how businesses have tended to respond in the more immediate sense, so during the event and following it. And then the second part of the project, which we'll initiate soon, is a series of in-depth interviews with a subsample of the survey respondents to better understand the impacts and their immediate responses, and then also to work toward developing some understanding of what are the key capabilities or conditions surrounding these businesses that tend to make them more resilient. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Kristen. Want to give one more chance. I haven't seen Steve join us yet, but if you're out there, Steve, I don't see him. So we're gonna press on with the questions. So you all talked about your work and answered this question a little bit, but I maybe wanted to give you guys an opportunity to expand on it. What are the most significant climate vulnerabilities that the businesses that you serve are facing? And Kristen, I'm going to start with you. I mean, you mentioned the wildfire impacts and power shutoffs. How is it really manifesting? How are the impacts really manifesting the most significant climate challenges for those businesses that you serve?
Sure, and I will add to that. Our focus has been on wildfire, but it's certainly not the only climate-related disruptive event to these businesses. They also experience drought and a number of other things. But the way that wildfire shows up as impacting businesses is primarily in disruption to utilities, difficulty accessing roads, whether that's for the business owner, operator, or staff themselves, suppliers, clientele potentially. Also, the effects of having to reduce your hours of operation, decreasing your staff, and then in the present times, trying to rehire staff under a pandemic where that's made difficult. and just overall decreased demand for services and products as people are inhibited from accessing your locale. And all of those things translating into decreased revenue, while at the same time, a lot of businesses are also facing increased cost of insurance.
I want to follow up with something that you'd mentioned, like the supplier and maybe some supply chain issues. How much have you been able to probe into these supply chain vulnerabilities that are also being driven by climate impacts? So, I just kind of imagine, a widget maker of some kind being supplied by a company that's maybe also in another high wildfire risk area, or maybe is in an area that's really affected by drought, and maybe they have like wastewater discharge issues that limits their capacity to produce whatever input that your widget maker is making. How far have you been able to probe into the supply chain for like climate related vulnerabilities?
Yeah, good question. And that is a point that we plan to follow up in more depth when we do the interviews, which we should be starting soon. But it's an interesting question, in part because while this project is focused specifically kind of on the impacts of local and regional wildfire to small and medium-sized businesses, in the interest of helping businesses to become more resilient to the impacts of wildfire, the reality is that there are all kinds of climate related and non-climate related events beyond the region and even within the region that are affecting businesses as well. And so certainly one of the things that we found through the survey is that for those businesses that are dependent particularly on global supply chains, it does make them more vulnerable, in part just because of the difficulty of anticipating disruptive events. And if you're dependent on sources in a lot of different locations for products, for example, there are any number of potentially disruptive events, climate related or not, that can impact those areas and then trickle down to you.
Yeah. Just really important insight, because I think it's maybe a little bit of a blind spot for just us as P2 practitioners, considering the challenges that the supply chain can impose on the businesses that we work with, but then also maybe that's an opportunity for us to expand our outreach beyond just that initial business and deeper into the supply chain, just specifically addressing climate related vulnerabilities, use that as kind of a stepping stone into doing more P2 work with other companies. So appreciate that. Bogdan, I want to turn it over to you. What are the biggest climate related vulnerabilities that you see with the businesses that you're working with?
Yes, on the field, I would say people start to complain. I mean, they complained before too, but one of this significant vulnerability, it's increasing regulation. A lot of the businesses which one I work with, they start to complain a lot because lately a lot of regulations change. Of course, some of them due to climate change. And, it's hard to explain them the reason for that. I mean, some of them they understood, some of them they don't, and they ask more questions. And of course, everything resumed to money. They, at least for them. And I still try to explain them it's just not just about the money. And I give them an example. Let's say if you don't have a water, or if the sewer system doesn't work properly, or it's overwhelmed, how are you going to run your business? Doesn't matter. Let's say if you don't have any regulation, you still cannot run your business. So we try to explain them the reason why lately the regulations, are changed because of this. On the other side, the hidden one, I would say the long-term shutdown, as we see here in LA. Should I put the camera? I'm sorry. Or yeah, I forgot to put the camera. Should I? Yeah, I don't know. The internet is low with the camera. Anyway, so as everybody knows in LA, we have a power outage, really frequent, especially in the summer. So a lot of the businesses are impacted by that. So can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes. So this is one of the hidden vulnerability of the businesses. So yeah, not to mention lately, especially this year, the lowest level of water which they receive, and especially Central California, which they have a big problem with the groundwater. A lot of wells there, you know, it was in the news the whole year. A lot of wells there dry out, and people, you know, carry the water from miles away. Like, I don't know, I would say like in 1800. I don't want to be, you know, so.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So a couple of really good points here that I want to, you know, drive people's creativity who are listening in on this, right? You know, so we have some, you know, wildfire driven calamities that are, you know, potentially impacting, you know, power grid ability of businesses to operate due to, you know, grid shutoffs, things of that nature. And then we got, you know, in Los Angeles also dealing with grid shutoffs, and then, you know, water availability. And so, you know, Bogdan, your work has dealt pretty extensively with, like, for instance, closed loop systems for water use, you know. And so you're talking about, you know, business resiliency in the face of these climate related disasters, thinking about, you know, pollution prevention solutions, right? Closed loop cleaning systems, on-site generation, building envelope efficiency, so you can continue to operate. You know, if you have your own on-site, you know, solar powered, wind powered, whatever type renewable generation, and then you have a really efficient building envelope, right? Then, you know, maybe these are like kind of P2 solutions that can make a business maybe more resilient to some of these types of, you know, climate related vulnerabilities. I think that there's lots of opportunity emerging here. So, Tiffany, I want to turn over to you. What are the main vulnerabilities you're seeing? Because we don't see maybe the flooding risk or the nor'easter kind of risk here. Although we did just have a bomb cyclone pass through here this weekend. So
yeah, well, that's unfortunate. Yeah, so you know, those types of storms do result in power outages, and so that results in businesses being shut down for unexpected amounts of time until those, you know, the electricity goes back on. And so you know, where we're focused with toxic chemicals in our line of work, you know, we've had, you know, when the electricity went out in Danvers in an industrial park, we had an explosion one Thanksgiving in the middle of the night. And, you know, that wasn't climate change related, but it certainly could have been any sort of circumstance when the electricity goes out. But really, we have a lot of coastline, and we have very, you know, businesses may be looking at an outdated flood map and think that they're fine. Businesses that use toxic chemicals are also in environmental justice communities. There's a huge overlap between climate justice and environmental justice, and so there seems to be a lack of people doing, you know, hands-on training or tabletop exercises, you know, and potentially, you know, how often are tier 2 facilities that use and store toxic chemicals being inspected, you know, and so there's just a lot of different risks that people don't think about until unfortunately something has happened. And our office really tries to help people look at it in a proactive way.
Yeah, and I mean, it's really interesting to think about. You know, it's like, well, a lot of times, you know, we're trying to reduce, like P2 practitioners will be trying to reduce the use of toxic materials in an industrial process because it's, you know, either being released to the atmosphere or being, you know, sent down a pipe, or it's, you know, exposing workers in some way. But then you think about these, you have these like transient events that, you know, cause releases, or potentially, like, you know, you're disrupting a supply chain of like a specialized toxic chemical. Like, how is that impacting that business? You know, either having to clean that up, you know, have to, you know, secure a supply of whatever that, you know, halogenated chemical is, right, in a time of real uncertainty, when you have like rail access that's not available or something. Road access might be difficult. If you're using things like maybe water-based cleaning units or something like that, something that's non-toxic, where the supplier availability is maybe more reliable, then that's maybe something to include in P2 outreach to businesses, just because of like thinking about these risks. Because I think maybe one of the more poignant examples of that somewhat recently, what I can't remember the name of which hurricane it was. Which was the one that hit Houston like 4 years ago, that just like completely just parked over Houston for a while, and it's just like, oh my, here's like the petrochemical capital of America, right? And how did that impact all of the not only the businesses immediately in that vicinity, but then also around the country. I think there's a lot of really important considerations here. So I'm gonna ask another question, just because I feel like there's maybe more discussion, and I've seen some articles about how public attitudes are really shifting on climate change. Business attitudes are shifting on climate change, in part because of all these really visible disasters. I mean, the Paradise burning to the ground, right? An entire town burning to the ground due to wildfire. I mean, all of these major climate related catastrophes is really kind of put the Sauron's eye, I guess, right, on the problem. And so I want to ask all of you, like, how have you seen the business perception of the risk and the desire to actually invest in resiliency change over the last decade, and where are you seeing the momentum going now? And since we left off with you last time, Tiffany, I want to start with you this time.
Sure. So climate change is now becoming a topic at local and regional emergency planning committees, which toxics users are or tier 2 facilities or toxic users are supposed to be part of. And I think that people are starting to pay attention to it. However, I think they'll pay more attention to it once the insurance companies start thinking about it. And I think that change too is coming with the realization of flooding in Massachusetts being an issue. But I do think that it's been really difficult to get people to act proactively on it. But if we can get people to be more involved with their communities, in Massachusetts, we have something called the Municipal Vulnerability Program, where the state has given money to communities to try to help them plan, to prevent accidents and also prepare and be more resilient. And I think getting companies involved in that, because companies are part of the community, people from the community work in those companies. I think getting them involved at the local level is really important.
Yeah. Kristen, how's the calculus changed for businesses that you serve regarding making, large scale or, expensive types of, resiliency investments, whatever they may be? They don't necessarily need to be expensive. How has the calculus changed for the businesses that you serve?
Sure. So I can answer that question mostly just from the present, since we're engaging with businesses over their experience with wildfire just in the very recent past. But I would say that businesses, I think, are very interested and in some cases eager to figure out how they can become more resilient to the impacts of wildfire. One of the interesting things that came out of the survey that we did was that 75% of the businesses had undertaken multiple activities to prepare for disruptive events. So the majority of them had business emergency plans or business continuity plans. They had relationships to business support organizations and had done many other different things to try to be prepared. And yet, across the board, they were all significantly impacted or have been, especially in the last couple of years. And I think that you know, the experience of being prepared or thinking that you're prepared or feeling prepared to a certain extent, and then, you know, learning that that you're maybe not fully prepared, but not necessarily knowing how you can be more fully prepared, certainly has people interested in learning what more they can do.
Yeah. Bogdan, how about you? Are you seeing attitudes change with these like the increasing, you know, publicity and severity of these events?
Yes, I've seen, but I think more accurate will be if we can do a survey, because we talk about the decade here. So if we can come up with this idea where you go there and send up a survey to businesses and see who's going to answer, and we can, you know, do a parallel and see how they see the businesses these days and how they see their business 10 years ago, whoever is still in business, because lately, you know, there are a lot of change of ownership and a lot of changes. But regarding the climate change, I think a lot of them, they can answer this question. But again, personally, I didn't deal with this one because, you know, it's not my part of expertise. On the other side, the monetary cost you asked, a lot of them would like to transit, let's say, from regular cars to electrical cars. But the cost, it's a, you know, it's a lot of them, they cannot afford that. I would say 90% of the facility, they wish to do that. The problem is, again, money and money.
Yeah. I want to change gears maybe just a little bit and ask about maybe some hidden vulnerabilities that businesses might not see that you all see in your work. And I'm thinking kind of about, at least in where I'm from, and I'm from Boise, Idaho, we've been really lucky, you know, ever since I've lived here my whole life, that we haven't really suffered through any kind of major drought, like, you know, multi-year type of drought thing. And so a lot of our infrastructure planning, specifically with regard to stuff like wastewater and irrigation needs, has largely been based off the assumption that, you know, we're going to continue to get what we've always got. And I think that if that, you know, it ends up being shocked by you know, a real drought, that it's going to put us in a real vulnerable position. But it's not really anything that's necessarily front of a lot of people's mind, except for maybe folks who are junior water rights holders. But, you know, so businesses don't see that, but they're going to be impacted by it anyway, because, you know, it's going to change what they're able to discharge to waterways, for instance. And then I think also about how, like, you know, a business doesn't know where all of the electricity that it uses is being generated from, right? And how it's being distributed through transmission lines. And so it's just like, when we got an article, you know, this summer that, you know, that bootleg fire in Southern Oregon was potentially putting, like, you know, millions of people at, you know, serious risk of long-term power shutoffs, because, you know, it was going to disrupt this transmission line because California was buying its power from the Columbia River on Bonneville Power Administration, right? It's like, well, you know, like, even like, you know, relatively aware businesses are not necessarily going to know all of that stuff. So what are the kind of hidden vulnerabilities that you guys see in the businesses that you work with that you want to draw our attention to? And Bogdan, I'll start with you.
Thanks. Yeah, I would say the long period of shutdown to the power outage, like the other day, the mudslides. So this weekend, I don't know if you, again, in the news, and everybody was saying, California, be careful. Over the weekend, we're going to be the cyclone, the, you know, category 4 cyclone or 5. So everybody prepare, everybody, you know, focus their attention on this, at least to prepare. And a lot of them, they were affected. So thanks God, we didn't get that much rain here in Southern California. But as far as I saw the news up north, in Sacramento and San Francisco, it was really disastrous. It was really bad. So that mudslides and, you know, all the debris and all the cleaning after that, it can interrupt the business's activities, you know, all over the place for a long time. And, you know, it's like a chain, like a domino, one get to the other one and affect everybody, and not just the short term, but even the long term.
Yeah, yeah, excellent point. Yeah, and I know that we've had some interesting, you know, road closures that have impacted certain areas recently. I know, like Colorado, I think it was what I-70 had even shut down through like Glenwood Canyon for a couple of weeks due to a similar type of event. So really good. Tiffany, how about you? What kind of hidden things are you seeing that we don't know about, that your businesses don't know about?
Yeah, so I will reiterate the cost of emergency shutdown too, and the liability, but also Kristen mentioned contingency planning. A lot of businesses don't have that. So making sure that that's in place, and also making sure that, you know, just standard operations and maintenance align with emergency planning, and that people are looking at, you know, the toxics that they're using, how they're stored, whether they need to be stored in particular areas. So a lot of these, you know, people don't think about them until after the fact. So I think that it's tricky, and those are very hidden. They're hidden until they're in your face.
Yeah, definitely. Kristen, what other hidden things do we not know about, or should businesses know about?
So one of the things that comes to mind, and that I think that a lot of the businesses, at least that have participated in this project, are certainly becoming aware of, are basically vulnerabilities that come to light when you're dealing with compound events. So vulnerabilities that come to light when you're you know, dealing with wildfire and the pandemic simultaneously, and you know, maybe as a business dedicated to hospitality or tourism in the Sierra Nevada, you were you know, kind of getting by under the pandemic because people could be outdoors, and then there's a fire nearby and it's smoky, and you can't really bring people indoors, and so now you've lost your clientele. So I think, you know, additional vulnerabilities that are coming to light as people grapple with compound events, and then kind of related to that, vulnerabilities that are coming to light as people deal with successive events. So like a really intensive wildfire season and drought. And then also, I think, you know, vulnerabilities that are coming to light as people deal with the greater frequency of repeat events. So you know, multiple summers of fairly catastrophic wildfires. And I think that for a lot of businesses, you know, it's the recovery time is shortening, and a lot of assets are depleted or in depletion, and they're not really able to necessarily build those assets back up before they're dealing with something else. And so I think it's kind of bringing to light this question of how do we prepare for and be resilient to compound events, or to successive events, or to repeat events.
Yeah, thanks for that. I want to ask all of you, you know, because I want to get a vision of the future, right? You know, I mean, there's a lot of unknowns that go into the, you know, into the calculation of like what types of investments, you know, I as a business owner might need to make to really be, you know, resilient to, well, I don't know sometimes, right? But, you know, because of your work, I want you all to give me and give all of us maybe kind of a description as to what does a resilient business look like? What does a business look like that's going to be able to, you know, weather these types of events? And Tiffany, I'm going to start with you, if that's all right.
Sure, we have a case study of a business that we particularly love, and he happens to be a very large woodworking facility near Plum Island in Massachusetts. It's in Newburyport, and the name is Mark Ritchie Woodworking, and he is in the middle of a hurricane zone. And we actually have a map, which I'll put in the chat later, of like to show chemical risks with flood risks. And so if you looked at his facility on that map, you'd see like that he's in a hurricane zone. He has, solar power. He has a wind turbine, and he also uses all of the wood waste from his facility to provide the heat and hot water. And it's a very large, it's not a small establishment, it's a very large establishment. And so we always look at him as the model, but it's scary when you look at him on the map because you're like, okay, that little red balloon is a toxic user. That little purple triangle is a large quantity toxic. So it's like, but he's okay. But still, like I said, those flood maps are a little old. And so we know that he's going to, be in the thick of things, but I think that he'd be more capable of up and running a little bit quicker. And I'll put our map in the chat too, if people want to look at it.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah. Bogdan, how about you? What's a resilient business look like?
Yeah, businesses become more resilient to globalized impact of climate disaster when they, use their commodities at local level. I think a lot of people, especially in LA, try to do this one. The breweries, the small restaurants, they try to use everything local, of course, as much as possible. And in the meantime, running the circular economy, which our department tried to put it together. And the other example, it's my presentation with the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, where they used to use 29 million gallons of water, drinking water, for their cooling tower, just for their cooling tower per year. Now, since they installed that system and they recycled the groundwater, which because the location, they are on aquifer and they have a lot of groundwater. So before, the only option was to discharge to the sewer, not to mention they have to pay for that to discharge to the sewer. Now, since they installed a new system, they recycle that water and they use the entire recycled water just for the cooling towers. In the future, they plan to add even more plant. That way they can use the water maybe in the facility, maybe as a gray water, maybe for the irrigation, because there are still a lot of restriction, as I mentioned earlier, there are still a lot of restriction now to use that water, even if it's probably more clear and better than others. But the rules and regulation, you have to follow up that.
Gotcha. Kristen, how about you? What does a resilient business look like that you're serving?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question, and it's one that the survey data doesn't necessarily allow us to answer, but that we'll certainly be pursuing in the interviews that we'll do with a subsample of survey respondents. But I can add that, one of the things that's interesting to us and that we'll certainly be talking to people about when we do those interviews is that so many of the businesses that responded to the survey had undertaken various activities to prepare for disruptive events. Like I had mentioned, the majority of them had emergency preparedness plans or business continuity plans. They had pretty good, well-established relationships to business support organizations and had done other things to be prepared, and yet we're still significantly impacted. So it's a good question and one that we're going to spend time on and moving forward.
Yeah, I know it's like, not all of these challenges are going to be able to, be mitigated just with P2, it's just like if the Forest Service shuts down an area, where your business is like they need their service industry and they need customers, like there's not really much we can do there, but that shouldn't stop us from pursuing other preparedness type of opportunities. I want to ask about what most of the folks on this call are P2 practitioners. They're doing outreach to businesses. if we're going to think strategically about where, there might be an intersection between P2 and resiliency planning and implementation, and I'm thinking about things like, implementing closed loop, water cleaning systems, or doing on-site generation, or doing like energy efficiency retrofits to, reduce, grid load, that type of thing. What type of resources exist out there for these P2 practitioners to really visualize or identify those businesses that might be most at risk to climate disruption, and then also have maybe the most opportunity to benefit from doing like P2 resiliency type of projects? Tiffany, since you posted your case study up there and your map, I want to pitch this to you first.
Sure. So I mentioned at the beginning that this all started with a grant that we got from the EPA. And one of the ideas was to create that map, which has tier 2 filers, other toxics users, but also environmental justice zones, flood zones, hurricane zones, like hospitals, trains and railway systems. And so what we did with that map is we took it to the road, and we had trainings with 6 regional planning agencies, and we had 2 different curriculums. The one was for the first responders to show them, like, this is the layout. We're going to your area. We're going to put in your zip code. We're going to show you all the toxics users. And then we asked the first responders to, 1, refer toxics users to OTA for free and confidential site visits, but also get them to recruit businesses back to the second training, where we actually showed businesses their vulnerabilities. So I think, we have tools on our website of the different trainings that we did for each region of the state, which I'm also happy to put those in to, and there's resources on how to, develop your own plan, and so I think sharing those, they might be a little bit different than, other places in the country, but it basically comes to being prepared and like showing people. You can put the address of your facility on this map, or if you're, in a board of health, look at your town on this map and look at who's in harm's way, and let's try to be proactive and have conversations with them. So I'll put the link to all of that also in the chat.
Yeah, thanks. Kristen, how about you? What resources might these P2 practitioners be able to turn to maybe be strategic about where they're looking to do outreach and technical assistance, where there might be a real, risk driver motivator for a business, but then there's also, P2 opportunity that intersects with that? What kind of resources are there?
So I think a great resource are business support organizations, whether they're like the Sierra Business Council, which is our partner on this project, Chambers of Commerce, at least in the area where we've been working. There are pretty extensive networks of business support organizations, many of which have a really good pulse on what's going on within their particular, support area. And so I think are just good resources for helping people to understand what the challenges are, and probably to have some initial discussions about, likelihood of businesses being interested in potential solutions. And you never know what sort of additional activities those organizations are up to that might be of help. So for example, right now, Sierra Business Council is in the process of conducting a region-wide vulnerability assessment. And so, thinking about those types of activities that those organizations might be undertaking, could be useful for practitioners in identifying issues and thinking about how to address them.
And because you're working on it right now, I feel like the survey that you had mentioned that you're going to be conducting, or in the process of conducting, I feel like that would be a really good resource for folks, just to give an idea of maybe like just some of the business preferences and perceptions on things, willingness to invest. Could you give us an idea of like the types of questions that you're going to be asking, what you're hoping to get out of the survey?
Sure, yeah, and so that is another great way is through through survey and research methods. And so the survey, really the intention was just to kind of create baseline data from which, so that we can inform ourselves about what's going on before we go in and have those more in-depth conversations with people. But the survey sought to document different types of impacts. So different types of operational impacts, different types of financial impacts to businesses from wildfire, the duration of those impacts, types of government or non-governmental support that businesses might have accessed in responding to those impacts, preferred information sources, how they had prepared themselves previously, if they had prepared themselves, whether they've prepared themselves subsequently. So really a range of things.
When do you hope to be done or completed with the survey?
So we are probably going to be done with the data analysis in November, and we'll produce a report after that that we'd be happy to share if of interest.
So I'll give you a call next week, right?
Yeah.
November, right
Yeah.
on. Okay. I think that is going to be of great interest. I know it is to me, so I will be in touch. Bogdan, how about you? What kind of resources might be available to the P2 practitioners to identify these businesses that are really at risk from climate disruption and where there might be P2 solutions to help mitigate that risk?
Yes, as I mentioned, our department to sector champion program and circular economy try to educate and connect businesses in the way where it's a closed loop, and somehow they either help each other or use each other's resources. If for one of them, let's say this is waste, for the other one can be gold. So as an example, a brewery, the waste from the brewery, it's these days, at least in LA, we have a bunch of breweries, small or medium, and all of them, they use the waste in farming. So we put the people together, we try to connect them, and that way, again, somebody waste can become somebody gold.
Yeah. One last question for all of you, and then I want to give the participants a chance to ask questions in the chat. And if you have any, go ahead and throw them in there. But last question to all of you, I want to ask what types of, and we'd mentioned this, with insurance costs and shutdown costs. Give us idea as to like the costs being borne by these businesses, both for just resiliency planning and then reacting to disasters, either from or like just the impact of the disaster itself, either the reaction to the disaster itself, and then the mitigation type of planning. So are we seeing things like, is it being reflected in insurance rates? How much lost business are we having, due to, certain types of natural disasters? And then, what are the costs of recovery if it's a disaster that directly burns down a business or floods it or whatever? Give us an idea of what these costs are, because that's always really the front of mind. That's how we sell our programs, right? It's just like, this is going to save you money kind of thing. So Bogdan, how about you? I'll start with you. What types of costs are you seeing being borne by these businesses?
Yeah, again, unless we do the survey, I'm not able to answer this question properly, because first of all, when I'm on the field, we do not discuss, monetary business, money business. So except we get the complaints here and there where they mention some money, like you say earlier, about insurance, about, changing the cars and other this type of issues. I don't really can get close to this answer. So,
Yeah, I know it's kind of like one of those, like there's not a great answer to this kind of question thing, but
Yeah,
I don't know. I guess even then, like, what's the trajectory? Do you have any kind of sense as to what the trajectory is if the costs, are higher? I mean, anything that I think you could pick up a newspaper and probably infer that that the costs are just going to continue to increase. But yeah.
Yes, definitely are higher. I mean, everybody complained that, every day everything went up. I mean, as you see, the gas these days, especially in California, it doubles. So this one reflecting their, daily activities. So this is again, closed loop where you cannot escape.
Yeah.
This is the bad loop. The circular economy supposed to be a good loop. So
yeah. Kristen, how about you? What are the costs that the businesses you're working with are seeing?
Yeah, so we don't know in actual numbers, but the increased cost of insurance is a big one and a difficult one for a lot of businesses. And I think it's also, it's something that they're experiencing now. And I think it's also something that has them a little on edge because they don't know whether the cost will continue to increase. And maybe it's already challenging. And it's also, the combination of increased costs in operating your business with decreased revenue that you have available to cover those costs. So it's a difficult one. And I do think that a lot of businesses feel the need to retain the assets that they do have because it's kind of a scary time. And so I don't know necessarily how willing or how easy it would be for them to make, substantial investments, even in things that would potentially benefit them down the road and being more resilient. But so I would think that, in presenting solutions to them, being able to show the benefits, including, potential financial ones, would be really important.
Yeah, definitely. And then Tiffany, what kind of costs are you seeing on your end?
Yeah, so I like Bogdan, don't know much about the economics of it, but what I do know is that toxic use reduction does save money. And where we have had accidents in Massachusetts, like the one in Danvers, cost the business, like there's no more business, and it blew out the windows of all of the neighbors. And so there was the cost of responding to that. We had an ammonia release that cost the life of a worker. We had an explosion in North Andover that cost another life of the worker. So there are costs, and also, businesses now know, since the pandemic, right, what an emergency shutdown happens when there's just under circumstances where you still have electricity, but you can't go to work anymore. It impacts the supply chain. But unfortunately, I can't speak to the economics because we really try to sell like the benefits and the cost that you'll save by reducing the amount of toxic chemicals you use, which works, both under climate change circumstances, in the terms of industrial accident prevention, but also just in terms if you don't have it, you're not buying it, you're not having to dispose of it, and it's not polluting the environment.
Yeah. So sorry, go ahead.
Yes, sorry for that. Now with this COVID, I mean, the last couple of years, so we're going to be very hard to make the differences. So if we had this discussion a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, it was a different discussion than today. After almost 2 years of pandemic where everything collapsed, and now it's hard to make the difference, especially, money-wise, and combine this one with the climate change. So it's pretty difficult. It should be two different discussions.
Yeah. So, well, I'm looking, I don't see any additional questions in the chat, but I just want to, reiterate for everybody that is still on the call with us that, I think that there's all of these focusing events, these climate change related disasters are really, they have a lot of attention, and I mean, it's very jarring, and it really, it's a powerful motivator. And I think we have a lot of opportunity as P2 practitioners to, use that energy and that attention to, utilize pollution prevention to build, resilience among businesses. So I think there's good opportunity here. And we talked a lot about, where the vulnerabilities are, it's electricity, it's around things like supply chain impacts, and there's potentially opportunity there to, like shortening supply chains or working within supply chains to build resiliency. And then you've got a lot of drivers, right? I mean, it's just money's a huge driver here. Being more resilient is going to make the business more financially sustainable in the long run. And I think there's a lot of strategic thinking that can go into how we, what types of businesses that we might work with, in the future, and how we approach pollution prevention from kind of a little bit of a different angle. So I want to thank all of you for participating on our panel. Really appreciate having you here. I'm sure that you'll all be getting questions in the future. I know that I'll be reaching out to you guys. So thank you all so much. And I think that's going to close us out. So I think I can pass it to Brittany, if that's right.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Christine,
Thanks.
Tiffany.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben. Thank you to our speakers for that great, important discussion and bringing us to the end of the roundtable. And thank you to everyone else for joining us for this year's virtual Region 9 and 10 P2 roundtable. And it was really great to see you all virtually. And I'm hoping that next year we can all meet again in person. So thank you to the rest of our speakers for the work that you're doing and the time that you spent sharing your excellent work with us. And please take a moment, everyone, to complete the survey that was dropped into the chat and share your feedback with us. So that concludes our event, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Brittany.
Thank you.
Good job, Brittany.
Yes, recordings will be available soon, and I believe we'll be sending those out.